spoke to them, and they appear to have budged. But is that really what we are seeing? Is it a subtle protest of what they really intended to do due to their opposition, or based on their opposition to Ken Ofori-Atta? We'll also look at some of the issues in the budget and see some of the issues that have come up for debate. The E-Levy has come up strongly. Road tolls has also come up, including a number of things. Moody's further downgraded Ghana's economy this week to CA status, which is still in the junk category or territory. Also, this week we saw an interesting thing, call it a fight against corruption. Adonoo, former CEO of the defunct Capital Bank, was due to be handed down a judgment. But just before that, the prosecution and his lawyers, Adonoo's lawyers, came up with an agreement that sought to pay some $90 million and walk free should the court convict and sentence him. However, the judge on the day, Justice Eric Che Bafo, rejected the offer and said it wasn't good enough. He asked them to go and better 90 million cedis, I should say. They asked them to go and better the deal and then come back to him on the 13th of December. Many people have praised the judge for upholding the fight against corruption. But is that really what it is? Or this is just a provision of statute they were trying to exploit? We'll also look at the Black Stars and the heartbreak they gave us yesterday. The Black Stars have crashed out of the ongoing Qatar 2022 tournament. They did so together with Uruguay. Uruguay, even though beat Ghana, could not survive because Korea defeated Portugal 2-1 in their duel. This is 97.3 Citi FM. This is The Big Issue. You're welcome to incisive analysis and a riveting conversation. I'll be right back, introduce my guest, and then we'll get the discussion underway. Don't go away. You're welcome back to the budget season, and indeed, government is signaling that it intends to do something new, causes a structural departure from what we've known. Government wants to exchange gold for oil. And we've seen that in the past in many forms. We've had the oil for food program or commodity for commodity programs. So look at how those programs has fared as well, all in the context of the economy. Government says it is going for the gold for oil program because it wants to conserve its, forex resources, and that buying gold or buying oil with gold will take off pressure from its forest reserves and take off pressure from the city as well, as we spend a lot of money, about $4 billion or so a year, importing crude and other related products. So we'll look at that in the context of the budget and the economy generally. My guest to help me do that will be Dr. Kabiru Mahama, who is the Technical Advisor Office of the Vice President, Franklin Kujo, President, Imani Africa, Ricketts Hagan, MP, Cape Coast South, and a former Deputy Finance Minister and a former Minister Central Region, Dr. Edu Sako, the lecturer, University of Ghana, Department of Economics, and lawyer Martin Kwebu, who obviously is a private legal practitioner. The second part of the program that will look at the restitution deal between the state prosecutors and Adonoo. We'll have Franklin Kujo on the panel. Kojo Asante, Dr. Kojo Asante, Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the CDD. Dr. Kabiru Mahama will be on that as well. George Ricketts Hagan will be on that as well. And Martin Kwebu as well will be on that panel. Once again, this is a big issue. But just to give you some updates of the stories we intend looking at, the minority in Parliament has predicted doom for Ghanaians in the year 2023. The group says due to the unhealthy policies outlined by the government in the 2023 budget, the public would have to brace themselves for worse economic conditions. Here's Ranking Member on the Finance Committee of Parliament, Dr. Keselatu Forson, debating the 2023 budget on the floor of Parliament.
The House commenced the debate on the 2023 budget on Tuesday, with the minority predicting hard times for Ghanaians in the ensuing year due to the unfavorable policies contained in the budget.
The mood in this House could tell you how hopeless the nation has become. Mr. Speaker, if you go out there, the mood on the street of Ghana will tell you that there's hopelessness in the system. Speaker, no wonder that the majority members of Parliament have abandoned their own budget. No wonder. No wonder. Businesses are going to go down, Mr. Speaker, and the repercussion, if care is not taken, is going to affect all of us. Mr. Speaker, I can see an economic tsunami. I can see an economic tsunami coming. Mr. Speaker, the year 2023, this budget has failed to address the concerns of the ordinary Ghanaian. Mr. Speaker, 2023 will be disastrous. Mr. Speaker, there's a massive cost of living crisis as we find ourselves. Mr. Speaker, it will surprise you to know that marriages are collapsing because of this government. Marriages are collapsing because cost of living is becoming so high. Mr. Speaker, that is where we found ourselves.
We must all admit that we are not in normal times. At the end of 2019, we completed an IMF program successfully. We saw our growth rate moving around 7% from 2017 to 2019. Our currency was strong, and inflation had been reduced to a single digit. So, Mr. Speaker, if today we find ourselves in this situation, clearly tells you that we are not in normal times. Mr. Speaker, little did we know that a global pandemic and a war in Europe will bring us down to our knees like this, where we see our currency depreciating by almost 54%, and we have no access to the international capital markets, something we've had since 2007. So, Mr. Speaker, this is really worrying. And, Mr. Speaker, the quicker we do something about it, the better. And it is in this region, or it is in this light, that we are asking our colleagues on the other side to support government with the revenue measures that it has stated in paragraphs 212 to 222 of this year's budget. Mr. Speaker, if we continue to we cannot kick the ball down the road, because every delay that we delay in passing out this revenue measure means we are pushing Ghana down the drain.
The minority also says it will reject the removal of the 100 Ghana cedis threshold for the electronic transfer levy deductions as proposed by the finance minister.
Be mindful that this same administration during the E-Levy debate had informed us that no one, particularly poor people, will be taxed when they are transferring money to another person. And as a result, the E-Levy, they are going to introduce a threshold to exempt small payments of 100 cedis. Today they are telling us again in the budget that the 100 cedis that the poor people apparently engage in the transfer, Mr. Speaker, they are going to bring it back on. Mr. Speaker, this is a tax for the poor person. Why should we, in this House, in these difficult economic conditions, still tax the person who your policies have made him poorer? Mr. Speaker, this again, I can confirm to you that we in the minority have made a position that on this matter will reject it with all our might and all our strength for this Republic of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, that is the position of this minority. Mr. Speaker, we believe that we should not accept this policy.
Mr. Speaker, improving the tax collection process is not the only way to increase revenue. That is why there is a need to raise some form of taxes to support our fiscal consolidation. And I'm therefore urging my colleagues on the other side to support government with these current revenue measures before the House, as listed in paragraphs 215 to 222, like I mentioned earlier.
Though the minority insists that policies outlined in the 2023 budget only seek to overburden the ordinary Ghanaian, the majority insists that the 2023 budget seeks to alleviate the plight of Ghanaians. Reporting from Parliament, my name is Ni Ayukwe Okain for Citi News. The House commenced the debate on the 2023 budget on Tuesday, with the minority predicting hard times for Ghanaians in the ensuing year due to the unfavorable policies contained in the budget.
The mood in this House could tell you how hopeless the nation has become. Mr. Speaker, if you go out there, the mood on the street of Ghana will tell you that there's hopelessness in the system. Speaker, no wonder that the majority members of parliament have abandoned their own budget. No wonder. No wonder. Businesses are going to go down, Mr. Speaker, and the repercussion, if care is not taken, is going to affect all of us. Mr. Speaker, I can see an economic tsunami. I can see an economic tsunami coming. Mr. Speaker, the year 2023, this budget has failed to address the concerns of the ordinary Ghanaian. Mr. Speaker, 2023 will be disastrous. Mr. Speaker, there's a massive cost of living crisis as we find ourselves. Mr. Speaker, it will surprise you to know that marriages are collapsing because of this government. Marriages are collapsing because cost of living is becoming so high. Mr. Speaker, that is where we found ourselves.
We must all admit that we are not in normal times. At the end of 2019, we completed an IMF program successfully. We saw our growth rate moving around 7% from 20.
Parliament continued with the debate on the 2023 budget presented by the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta on Thursday. During the debate, the Deputy Minister for Employment and Labour Relations, Bright Rekubrobe, says the demand for a 60% increase in basic salary by organised labour makes it difficult for the government to offer more employment into the public sector.
Mr. Speaker, the total tax revenue for next year will also be hovering around approximately 112 billion. And out of this, 44.9 billion is going to be used to pay public sector workers. Mr. Speaker, as we speak now, we are in negotiations with them, and it's very tough. They are asking for 60%. Yesterday, they asked for 65%, and 700,000 workers demanding this from our tax revenue for next year. For me, yesterday I felt frustrated. I told them that I was frustrated because the increments we are putting to them, they don't seem to even see eye to eye with the fact that we have been so realistic, we have been so transparent, and we are seeking that they understand that we are in difficult times. So, Mr. Speaker, when this is happening, it then becomes very difficult. If you have public sector workers demanding 60% pay rise, it becomes very difficult for the government to continue to hire. So this freeze matter is simply not coming as a freeze per se, but it's also ensuring that we empower the private sector to do more employment.
The minority also bemoaned the non-allocation of funds for the government's Agenda 111 policy in the 2023 budget.
As I speak to you now, if you pick the 2023 budget, the one we are debating, absolutely no allocation has been made to Agenda 111. Has it been abandoned? Yes. They should tell us. If it has been abandoned, they should tell us. If the ministers don't think there's allocation to Agenda 111, you should tell us. Mr. Speaker, but the interesting aspect is that in the 2021 mid-year review budget, page 100, that 600 million Ghana cedis was allocated and utilized in the name of Agenda 111. Mr. Speaker, in the 2022 budget, another 518 million Ghana cedis was also allocated to Agenda 111. Mr. Speaker, per a letter written by the Ministry of Finance, signed by the Chief Director, Mr. Patrick Numo, to the committee investigating the expenditure of COVID-19, another 763 million Ghana cedis has been expended on Agenda 111. Mr. Speaker, in all, we are talking about 1.9 billion Ghana cedis. Not a single hospital has been completed in the name of Agenda 111. Where is the money? Mr. Speaker, as we speak today as Parliament, we do not know the list of Agenda 111. We don't know the current status of Agenda 111. We don't know which contractors are in charge. We don't know how much has been paid to who.
In the 2022 budget, for example, it was funded under this Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. And this year, same is being applied. So if you say that Agenda 111, there's zero budget, that cannot be made to stand. So this one we should be correct.
During proceedings, the minority threatened to resist the approval of budget estimates for ministers who failed to move the motion themselves in the House.
Mr. Speaker, when we get to approval of budget estimates and ministers don't appear in person by themselves, we will not support the approval of the budgetary allocations to those ministers. We will not do it. So ministers must take this House very seriously, that only ministers so appointed by President Nana Addo Dankwa to oversee the sectors must rise on their seats to move motion to ask for budgetary allocation and approval by this House. Failure to do so, leader, you are assured that we will stand down a number of those motions.
Minorities are related to the fact that the consideration of the estimate should be led by the ministers. It's only the consideration of the report, even before the committees. Before the committees, we expect the ministers to be there. So the ministers should take a cue.
As the debate on the 2023 budget continues, the minority says it will reject any budget estimate approvals for ministers who fail to appear before the House to move the motion themselves. Reporting from Parliament, my name is Ni Ayikwe.
All right, so you're welcome to the big issue, live on 97.3 Citi FM. My name is Selorm, Adonoo, and my guests are ready. And so we want to kickstart the discussion. I started with Dr. Kabiru Mahama, who is Technical Advisor, Office of the Vice President. Doc, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
What do you make of the budget debate so far this week? We've seen quite some riveting debates apart from everything that has been going on. What's your general take on the quality of debate so far and the issues raised?
Yeah, I mean, let me just say good morning to you and to your cherished listeners, and then and my co-panelists who are also joining us, Franco Lokujo and then Pebu Council Esquire. Selorm, the issue of you don't recall when the finance minister presented the budget on the 24th of November. One would have expected that the debate after the post-budget retreat at Ho or so, one would have expected that the whole House will take the budget serious and would start the debate off on a very serious note. But I must admit that the attendance, the zeal, the enthusiasm of the members of Parliament towards the budget has not reflected the seriousness of the time. And that is one point I need to stress forcefully, and that when you are faced with a crisis and you are presenting a budget under a program or a prospective budget under a program, one would expect that members of Parliament, ministers of state who are members of Parliament, and even ministers of state who are not members of Parliament will sit through the debate, because the procedures of the House allows a minister of state to sit through the debate, of course, without prejudice to the fact that you have no voting right. So one would expect, and I can feel the sense that both house of the House, the minority and the majority, have agreed to the point that we need to have the attendance of ministers. And when the minority leader raised that particular issue, you would have found out that the majority leader agreed with him that the members need to participate. So I've listened to the issues raised by the minority on the budget, of course.
But before you get to that, in terms of the participation, you know, the minority, yes, they are supposed to be there, but it is your budget. So if the majority, who are, you guys are in charge of the coffers of the state, you don't show enough interest to appear to debate the budget, to push the agenda of the president forward, What should the minority be doing? You should have full house there and find a way of getting the minority to come along with you.
Yeah,
if just about 15 to 30 of your members out of the 137 appear, that surely is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem, but as you mentioned, I feel like when, you know, the participation in the debate on the budget is equal as important as the vote on the budget. So I will not be surprised to have the full membership of the MPP being when the budget is proposed for, approval or to be voted on. But that's not even the issue. The real issue is that the minority have a higher responsibility than the majority in terms of the debate of the budget. Because this is budget presented by the majority, more or less. Ministers, the members of parliament have had consultation, some of whom are members of, members of cabinet. So that responsibility of preparing a budget has been discharged largely by the majority. But they should also understand that there is also an oversight responsibility, much as we don't have a clear-cut separation of power. Our arrangement has also imposed some responsibility on the majority to have some oversight responsibility as well. So in discharging that responsibility, I think that they did not live up to that particular responsibility on the part of the majority by their failure to attend to that particular precedent. And I'm sure that this is something that the president will be very appalled at, because I mean, your members of parliament are expected to sit through the debate of the budget. But of course, there have been schools of thought that have argued that this is partly as a result of the apathy, the disdain towards the presentation of that budget by the finance minister. But be as it may, I don't think it should be an issue, because you have agreed to have the minister presenting the budget. If your earlier intransigence was to the fact that you don't want the minister to present the budget, and that you had stick to that particular plan, and that they had forced their way to have the minority only sitting down and they are presenting the budget, you can't boycott the debate of the budget as a protest. But you've agreed with the president, you've agreed with the leadership, you've agreed with the elders of the MPP to sit through the presentation of budget. It is only well and good that you also sit through the debate of the budget. Of course, members may have to come and explain whether there were certain engagement that have taken almost more than half of their membership.
But not when a serious matter like the debate is happening. And this budget, I mean, to contextualize it, this budget is very important given the economic context we are in. Negotiating an IMF deal, all the matters surrounding the finance minister, eventually he gets to deliver the budget. This budget is supposed to be the one to tell us what to do next, etc. You know, now we see ministers and members of parliament who are supposed to be driving this after the finance minister has presented it. We see them on social media chilling in Qatar. The optics, obviously, are not good. You are telling us to tighten our belts or seatbelt, whatever. It may not be state money, but the fact that everybody is complaining and you have enough resources as a public official to go to Qatar jamboreeing, that really doesn't show, empathy to the suffering masses who are having to struggle to pay a lot of fuel, pay high school fees, cost of food, etc. It's quite reckless, many have said.
Yeah, you see, that discretion, that exercise of discretion by the cabinet ministers involved in this particular case,
and they are cabinet ministers.
Yes, was exercised without critical reflection of the situation, I must admit, because nothing explains, nothing justifies the fact that you are in this situation and that you have the luxury of time to go to Qatar and to observe. Of course, you have gone there to perform another national duty, that is to cheer up the Black Stars and to rally support for the Black Stars.
But Black Stars doesn't need, or they do not need a minister to be chaired. I mean, when you are screaming in the stand, there's no difference in the shouts of a minister and an ordinary, Black Star supporter.
No, of course, without let us know, if a minister of state visits the players, at camp, and then the caliber of Selorm and then Napo goes to the camp, the euphoria, the enthusiasm, the motivation of the boys is totally going to be different.
So that's what they went to. I'm
not saying that takes precedent over the fact that there's a much more critical issue onshore within your country that you need to address, which is the budget. That is more critical for the purposes of national development than going to Qatar. That fact has to be established. But that's what I made a point that exercise of that discretion was quite unfortunate. They should have reflected a bit more on this. I mean, the feeling of the Ghanaian public, what they think about the situation, and that even if you are going with your private resources, people would invariably say that you are very insensitive to the times. And the ministers, I believe, on hindsight, wouldn't.
Would they be right in saying that they took a cue from the president? The president himself, on the day of the presentation of the crucial budget, the very important budget, planned to Qatar to go and see the boys, when his colleagues, didn't even have to go there. They spoke to them on phone, Zoom, etc. But he took a flight, went all the way there to do what he had to do. And then, possibly his ministers are just following suit.
Yeah, Selorm, the president had delegated the presentation of the budget in line with Article 179 of the Constitution to the finance minister.
So he could go to sleep?
I'm making a point, to the finance minister to do that. Now, the president would probably have some time at his disposal. How best do I use this other time or this time at my disposal? Is it to rally around the boys at a time that national cohesion, that the only abiding fate of the Ghanaian public is the national team? Because that is the only point you find the whole nation rallying point. So the president going there to see that, okay, this is the only brightest spot in these particular times of our national wars.
The only bright spot left.
Yeah, that is the only bright spot left. Okay? Especially so when you are having economic challenges, when you are having a sharply divided parliament, when you are having a very polarized political terrain, the only rallying point is the Black Stars. So the president going there, knowing very that if the Black Stars should perform, it's going to be a plus to the nation. At least, momentarily, people would forget about any challenges they are facing and to probably have solace in the fact that the Black Stars have been able to hold high the flag of Ghana on the international scene. That was the basis, that was the understanding that the president...
I don't know that you read comments that even his going there, didn't help matters, because it's like you are coming to deem the only bright spot we have. They didn't even want to see him there at all, because this is the only thing we are left with. You are going there to quote unquote spoil it. That was some of the comments that came up.
Yeah, those comments came from, of course, the few cynics or the cynical few who sees nothing good in any measure taken by the president, because the team itself is an extension of the country, of the republic, and the president is the executive authority of that particular republic. Okay, so the president going there, let's even assume that even where we have mature democracies, where there was supposed to be a national program of an NDC executive, say in Dubai, and the president have the time, the president is supposed to tell them, because by extension they are what they call citizens of the country. So that political division and the commentary around the president thinking that the president attendance is the cause of the defeat of that particular first match, I think that is just
not quite. They just felt he shouldn't go and pour sand in the gari of the
How
state.
is the president pouring sand in the gari of the Black Star? By visiting them. If his attendance will not ginger the boys, it will not dim the enthusiasm of the boys. So that is an established fact. So I don't think that people should be measuring in that particular triviality by saying that the president attended. In fact, it wasn't only the president who attended. In fact, George Weah went for his son, not just his national team, but the wife and the president of Sierra Leone went to Qatar to cheer up their son.
But their economic reality is very different from ours.
It is not different.
No, it's very different from ours.
It's not different. In fact, inflation in Sierra Leone is on the high.
Liberia
is very high. Our economic standard in terms of the leak in Africa is quite higher than Liberia. Okay. So
unless of course Ghana is comparing itself with Liberia.
We are not comparing ourselves.
And that's where we have reached.
No.
That's fine. Let's hold it there. I'll come back to you. Let me go to Franklin. Franklin, I'm sure you follow the debate. You follow the matters arising. What would be your quick thoughts on this so far?
Good morning to my good friend in the studio and yourself. First of all, I think it's true that we are in perilous times, and it is important that every every important decision maker, in this case, in terms of the legislature, every member of parliament must be interested in the debate of a budget that is supposed to somehow attempt to stem the tide of the hardship that is ahead. And so, indeed, I think the call by everybody that these things must be taken seriously is actually very important. And I say so also because, to be fair, there are certain expenditure items within the budget or in the budget that needs examining, especially because we are in critical times. We think that some of those expenditure items are quite superfluous. They are quite, for lack of a better word, probably quite annoying. To think that the cathedral still has a vote, and in some regards, the numbers I've seen, if you need to study the allocations properly you've come to the realization that almost 330 million Ghana cedis would be going to the cathedral in the next coming year and beyond. And I think this is very, very, very serious. And as there must be some justification for it. I mean, if you're in a crisis, I don't know whether the cathedral would have to be, should I call it, front-loaded in such a way that we have to go and pray and get out of the crisis. But it's not, essentially, it's not one of the very serious items or very ambitious, not necessarily ambitious, not very significant items you should be spending money on right now. So I think I thought we should flag this issue as one of the things that ought to engage parliamentary debate. But overall, I'm wondering why, and I'm sure it will come up as well, that still in the crisis mode, you are attempting to spend close to 207 billion Ghana cedis. If you add amortization, that comes to about 227 billion Ghana cedis, when you are projecting to raise 144 billion Ghana cedis. So that's almost, should I call it, in fact, and that's a huge jump, by the way, from the previous revenue mobilization. Don't forget the revenues that were mobilized in 2022 at the end of September fell short by close to, I think, almost 5% thereabout. So to make bold claims that you are going to, for instance, rake in close to 2 billion Ghana cedis from E-Levy, which incidentally has done relatively a little above 300 million Ghana cedis in 2022, is quite ambitious. So I think that there are grave matters in the budget that we need to discuss, and everyone who matters in Parliament must be present to have this debate. I think it's important to also make the claim, not the claim, but actually a fact that we are likely to see an increase in employment, direct employment under the Office of the Government Machinery. You're looking at almost 1,300 people more being employed, when in actual fact the government is in talks with the IMF and trying to project that there's going to be not just employment freeze, but likely to retrench close to about 80,000 people in the public service. So there are a number of issues that I think are quite grave that ought to be discussed. And so we shouldn't take these things quite lightly at all.
I see. Good one. So I'll come back to you on that. The Honorable Rikiti Higan, pardon. You were in Parliament. I don't know whether you're one of the absentee MPs on the floor on those days. Oh, were you absent?
Never.
Okay. But have you debated yet?
Yes, I have.
Okay. What was your sector? What sector did you debate on?
Well, I actually, first of all, good morning to our viewers, and good morning to my colleagues on your panel, both present and on Zoom. And also, quickly, to say that we're all obviously saddened by yesterday's events. I think that the Black Stars did not perform as well as maybe we were expecting, but it's a young team, and I believe that given time, the potential is there. They will probably do well in the future if they get a coach who's actually going to be through with them consistently. Yes, I was in Parliament, and I took part in the first day of the debate. I focused mainly on revenue and expenditure, which is basically to do with the making sure that the revenues that we are talking about raising is actually realistic, and then the expenditure items are looked at properly. I think one of the problems, and I think Frank just brushed on it, that in doing a fiscal consolidation, which is obviously leads to the kind of deficit, we look at. Many a times, and since 2017, we've been basically been, I wouldn't say overhyping, probably will not be the right word, but we've not been realistic with our revenue, numbers. And if you look at the measures that we have in the budget to do with tax measures, with the 2 billion that Frank just mentioned from E-Levy, obviously not realistic. It's not going to happen when you look at the history, or you look at what's happening.
That history, we shouldn't forget, was bedeviled with the initial resistance that your side gave to the E-Levy. That's one. Number two, the fact that the rate was high. And all of that. This time around, the rate has been reduced to 1%, and the threshold has been scrapped. So it means that you have a lot more people being affected by this 1%. So hopefully you rake in more money. So you can make the two.
But people are basically worse off. I mean, if you are sending 200 when the budget is approved, you'll be paying more than you will pay for 200. Now
a year ago.
Okay, a year ago. So obviously it is a counterproductive tax, which in the end,
you're still bringing the money.
Well, it wouldn't. If it's counterproductive, it means that people will eventually continue to find other means, to send their money. The other thing is that if you look at the VAT, which is 2.5%, and you look at the numbers what they intend to rake in, you realize that it doesn't really add up to the 144 billion, tax revenue. Yes, government needs to be aggressive in trying to, raise our revenue, but they also have to be realistic. The 144 is actually not achievable, especially if you look at what our last, revenue projection was. We projected 100 billion, and then in mid-year we had to even come and revise it. Again, an unrealistic revision of 96 billion. To date, or as of September, we had only achieved about 65 billion. Looking at that, you cannot make a projection based on all the tax measures that they have mentioned in the budget that you are actually going to get 144 billion. Now, the expenditure has also gone up quite considerably to about 205, 207 billion, which when you ask the amortization and all that, it's much higher than that, which is what we will approve in appropriation. Now, the question then becomes that do you do these things to actually suppress your deficit? Because basically, if you increase your interest rate, you increase your revenue beyond what you are actually going to achieve, then what you are doing is you are suppressing the deficit. And don't forget that the accumulation of your deficit is what leads to your debt. So if you suppress your deficit, that's what you are going to borrow to fund. You borrow to fund the deficit. So you give a picture of money you are going to borrow, which is actually going to, in the end, going to be more than that. So Parliament approve a financing for a deficit that in the end will balloon, because when you don't achieve the revenue and you continue to pursue the same expenditure, then you are going to end up having to borrow more, which is something that has not been approved. This is what has caused this government to get a kind of debt overhang that we have at the moment. Because many a times, if your deficit should be proportional to your borrowing, so if your deficit looks small, you have slimmed your deficit by this exercise of overstating your revenue, overstating your revenue, and still your expenditure is still high, and you are not able to achieve it. Then we assume that we are getting a slim deficit. Therefore, the funding for the deficit, which is the borrowing, is also going to be small. So why is it that we are, apart from the COVID year, we are showing this since 2017, we are showing this small deficit but our borrowing is actually going up. It doesn't add up. So this is one of the areas that I looked at.
Very well. So in terms of the revenue measures, so we have the property tax we've spoken about many times. This time around, it came with a bit more clarity and specificity that there's some electronic means and platform which is being set up to help rake in revenue from that side. That surely is a positive. And
let's hope it happens, because
that obviously, or that hopefully will rake in some more money. There's a talk about the extending the income tax bracket, so the rich pays more tax. That surely may also rake in quite some amount of money, and a few other revenue measures, including resourcing the GRA to be more aggressive in collecting taxes. And you're saying that all of these put together will not help
you get one. Some of them are basically wishful thinking. Others are counterproductive. So in the end, you won't get the revenue. I mean, I don't remember the last time we were able to achieve, the revenue that we had projected. And then so that is the problem, and that's what creates the debt that we end up building up. Because then it doesn't make sense if somebody is looking at your deficit patterns over the years and think that, you are doing well on your deficit. But if you're doing well on your deficit, why is your debt going up? Because your debt is supposed to finance the deficit. So it is basically to do with us not being able to do proper projections, or do projections with a mindset that we are trying to suppress deficit. And it's not only that. The other side of it is, you remember below the line items and all that. That was also done for the same reason. Because when you take the below the line items and all that, then you assume that your expenditure is not that big. Again, that will give you a much smaller deficit, only to have to go and borrow to fund those below the line items, which is your financial bailout and your energy area. So, our projections themselves are problematic in the budget, and that we tend to overestimate things and get into serious problem. The other thing quickly that I also talked about was to do with the relationship between Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance in terms of deficit financing, the same deficit financing. That, again, as a result of all these revenue, things that we do, we end up having to get money from the Bank of Ghana, which the Bank of Ghana refuses to admit. But it's basically printing money. The only way Bank of Ghana gets CDs is actually to print it. Every CD that is in the system. Even the Bank of Ghana, of course, is a bank of last resort. Therefore, it gives money to banks, and then they pay back with interest. But even the interest they are paying with are CDs. That comes from the same Bank of Ghana. So if you are financing your deficit, when we have a monetary rule, which is the Bank of Ghana's Act, that we should deficit finance, if we should do it at all, 5%. Should be 5%. When we were on the IMF program, they were pushing us to do 0. 2016, we did 0 financing. Okay, from 2017 to date, or let's say 2019, especially to date, we have been financing over and above 10%. The last one being about 11%. Then they tell you that, these monies that are being given to government is coming from IMF SDR, that is a special drawings, or is coming from a residual ECF, that is a program that we were on that we completed. We are still supposed to be receiving some money from the IMF, which is quite difficult to understand. Then they talk about repos, and it's either somebody doesn't understand how some of these things work, or they are giving reasons to things that they are doing that are completely different. I mean, repurchasing offer, which is quite similar to what the Americans were doing, called quantitative easing, is to actually buy government bonds to be able to hold the price. Because if you believe that the market is going against government in terms of its government bond, like what is happening to us at the moment, then just like companies buy their shares back, it's like a share back program. So I buy my share back so that it doesn't drop further. It's the same thing. So how come that government money will be due to the Ministry of Finance instead of a debit? Because government is supposed to pay to get these bonds from people. But then they are saying that the money that is being given to government is coming from a repurchase, repos. And somebody needs to explain this properly. Maybe what they are doing is not repos, but it's something different. Or unless it's the reverse repo, which I find it difficult to understand. So they are actually financing government through this deficit financing over and above what's been agreed or what is law. Now, what that is doing is not only just doing it. What that is doing is that is inflationary. Anytime you print money to put into the system, it's inflationary. So the same Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance or the government is trying to solve the problems that part of it is being created by them. Because if you cause the inflation we are experiencing at the moment, yes, we do agree that there are some exogenous factors to do with COVID, Ukraine war, and all that. It's a component. But there are also factors which is to do with what we are not doing right. Biggest components is to do with food, inflation, petroleum, and obviously transportation and all that. Also, the financing of deficit by the central bank is also part of it. So then, Bank of Ghana, when inflation then goes up, what does the Bank of Ghana do? Bank of Ghana thinks that, it's our responsibility to target inflation, to raise the policy rate. But you are part of that creation. And you are doing the job that should be done by the fiscal side, which is the Ministry of Finance. Because the inflation you are experiencing, it's not a demand inflation. When you are using money, you are printing money and giving it to the central government or giving it to the government. What you are doing basically is you are putting money into the system. It's just a method of supply, money supply. But that money supply is not going to create demand because the money is spent recklessly. That money that is given to government is spent on lavish, on reckless expenditure, on other things. So it doesn't do what it's supposed to do in the system to create the demand that you need. Therefore, central bank cannot use the same tool, interest rate, which is used to target demand inflation, to bring inflation down. It is not surprising that it doesn't matter how the Bank of Ghana increases the policy rate, inflation is also still going up. So if the Bank of Ghana should stop financing this deficit, which is going to reckless expenditure, then inflation itself will begin to come down. And when inflation comes down, then there wouldn't be any need by the central bank to increase the policy rate.
I see.
So these were the two areas. I did talk about other things, but these were the two areas that I focused on. Because the biggest problem we have at the moment, if not addressed, is inflation and the depreciation of our city. It affects pretty much everything that we are doing.
Very well. So Doc, a lot has been said, especially about your revenue targets. Franklin did make the point that it didn't make sense to him that in the previous year, you could not even meet a revenue target. Now, you have almost doubled that which you couldn't achieve in the previous year for next year. What gives government that confidence, targeting 144 billion in the next year?
Yeah, so Selorm, you would realize that in the budget, the finance minister has spelled out new revenue measures, revenue compliance or assurance measures, and also the fact that expenditure rationalization or containment. These are going to be done mostly or largely under a farm program. With that particular framework, one would expect that your revenue projection would come to stay or will come to fruition. But that said, I believe that, of course, he has mentioned since 1992, our revenue measures or our revenue estimation projection have never been met. Okay, but that's not to suggest that you should not always challenge yourself with a high benchmark, working to fulfill it. One will always argue.
That challenge should be realistic.
I'm coming. I'm based on the fact that this challenge being put, government will not put a target that it feels sincerely within itself that it is not going to achieve it. One of the measures, we have the estimates. If we increase, VAT is approved. Based on this particular estimate, is approved. That is a new revenue measure of increasing our revenue on that particular bracket by 2.5%. Okay. E-Levy has been examined, stimulated, and different scenarios have been given. And I remember the presentation made by the Ministry of, GRA in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance at the EMT, clearly giving a scenario of when we reduce it by 1%, what is going to be the effect, the net effect of that. And when we reduce, apart from the delay, almost 6 months.
This simulation and this presentation by the GRA, was it post the passage of the E-Levy Act? Or this is just before the budget?
In fact, it was done before the pass. In fact, before the proposal of that particular measure to Parliament.
Yes, but has any such thing been done again before?
Before this
budget was
presented? Before this budget was done, another analysis have been done on this E-Levy issue. And one of the things that came to the realization of the team was that one, because of the threshold exemption, someone will do an electronic transfer of 700 Ghana cedi in a week, okay, without paying a dime as form of electronic transaction payment, because every 100 Ghana cedi a day by 7 days gives you 700 and you don't pay anything. That is one way of people evading, eluding.
That would be for the very poor, because the poor people should not be taxed like that.
That was the argument. And that argument, probably some other people who probably should be contributing to be making their, no matter how minute it is, their modest contribution to the fund are finding ways of escaping it. That was the reason why the government proposed the need to review that particular measures of exemption. Two, we have some other people doing transfer through Momo, the merchants. He's a member of parliament. I'm not sure most of the transfer he does is through his phone. They will compile the list. They have the problem. They compile a list of people they want to do transfer to, and give it to their assistant to go to the merchant and transfer to that particular list. The merchants transfer were exempted from this E-Levy.
But if he may be selling to poor people, why should that money
it's the payer who is, the payer.
He is paying, but he doesn't have to be taxed for doing good to somebody.
No, but you are not doing, it's not the tax because you are doing good to someone. It is the platform that is being provided for that transaction to go through. That is what the levy is on.
If you are using me as an example, I have stopped doing.
No, I'm just giving an example. So you see, and other people, because of, I would not want to call it the of course, if you disagree with the government policy, try to ask. But when it becomes law, okay, when it becomes law, no matter how, repugnant that law is, you must abide by it. Okay, the resistance should be at a level of what do you call it when it is still not passed into law. Afterwards, you can even go to the appropriate place. People have gone to litigate on this particular E-Levy issue, and judgment have been passed on this particular. So that is one other issue. Other issue is we didn't have property rates coming into the bracket. Now, government, by the arrangement between the local government and the GRA has been asked to collect property rate on behalf of the local government with a revenue sharing formula. Okay, even though this is money going to the central, to the local authorities or local assembly, 30% of which comes to the central government by way of what, to support government budget. That is another revenue sources. Apart from the fact that government is trying to reverse the benchmark, which was already, which has also caused significant loss of revenue. All this put into the basket will tell you that government is determined to meeting this revenue target. So that issue about revenue target being too ambitious, too optimistic, it is a genuine call, especially so when we don't meet our revenue. But when you miss your revenue target, he mentioned by 5%, okay, last year, 5 or 6% last year, and that you are doing this program under a fund program, you don't expect that. Even if we miss this budget by even the same margin, this estimate budget will have a better, yes, we'll have great and a lot of revenue. Imagine issue about the central bank hikes of interest rate.
I'll come back to that. So just keep it. Martin Pebu Esquire is here. I know you've been following the budget, Martin. Your quick thoughts on that. I want to take a quick break. Your quick thoughts on the budget and the debate so far, just in 1 minute. We'll come back and deal with it properly.
Okay. So, number one, I think it's too little, too late. Because, and I follow Honorable Rickett Hagan's thoughts on it, that you don't see how they're going to raise 205 billion, right? Because in view of the fact
they
that
spend 205 billion.
No, we are going to spend.
Yes.
So we are going to spend. So how are we going to raise to spend? When, as of now, we haven't been able to raise about 70 billion. The last time, when I was following the debates last week, it was around 65.
Very well.
So if you haven't been able to raise about 70 billion yet. You say you will spend 205. It tells you that this is quite a shaky budget. And the only message I can discern from it is that, look, the president has lost the plot. The vice president follows in tow. Ufuriata next. And so they just have to go. Look, because the mood of the country is that, look, people have just seen that this is a bunch of super incompetent persons and they just have to go.
Very well.
There's no other way to it.
Very well. So we're taking a short break. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we will continue the discussion and also introduce Dr. Edusako, who is also joining us on Zoom into the discussion. This is the big issue. Don't go away. You're welcome back to the big issue on 97.3 Citi FM. Also welcome our TV viewers on Citi TV. We are also live on DSTV channel 363 and on GoTV 182. We are on YouTube at CityTube. Kindly join the discussion with your comments via our WhatsApp line 05505885832 or 0549986993, and then we'll read your comments out to the rest of the world. We've been looking at the budget debates and matters arising. We've mentioned that some of the difficulties or key things that this government must fix include fuel, the hike in fuel prices, food inflation, the availability of forex, if you like. Government, through some means, has announced a gold for oil program, which hopefully will drive down the price of fuel at the pumps. We'll examine that in the course of the discussion. So far, the discussion has been centered around the revenue mobilization measures. Two of my panelists, three, think that the targets have been ambitious. Government is seeking to raise 144 billion, but hoping to spend about 205 or 227 billion, depending on whether we add amortization to that. Meanwhile, in the previous year, we could not raise 70 billion. The year hasn't ended yet, though, but we've not been able to raise 70 billion. That is some cause for concern. However, the government person, Dr. Mahama, in the studio, thinks that it's doable and it is reasonable. We'll continue to look at that. Let me introduce my guest once more. Franklin Kujo, President of Imani Africa, Dr. Kaburi Mahama, Technical Advisor, Office of the Vice President, George Ricketts Hagan, Honorable Member of Parliament for Cape Coast South, former Deputy Finance Minister, former Regional Minister, Cape Coast, Martin Pebu, Private Legal Practitioner, and then Dr. Edusako, who is with the University of Ghana Economics Department. Gentlemen, again, you're welcome to the program. Dr. Sarkodie, what do you make of the discussion generally that the revenue target for 2023 appears very, very ambitious? And given what we've seen in the immediate past, or even this year, we've not been able to meet that target. And so raising that target to almost about double, it's too ambitious. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, if we want to behave as a middle-income economy, then we must as well raise revenue domestically. And I agree that we have to up our game in our revenue mobilization. Per my own calculation, in each year, if we want to be on the average with the Southern African countries, then we must project our tax revenue to be 2.5 times the real GDP growth projection. Now, the real GDP growth projection for next year is 2.8. So 2.5 times 2.8 is about 7. And then you add the inflation because you're talking about nominal figures. So you have to add the inflation rate. The projection for next year is 18.9. You look at that, you're talking about some 25.6. And so if you look at this year's tax revenue versus the projection for next year's tax revenue, if it is within the 25%, 26, 24, 25 plus or minus 1, then I think that the projection should be okay. Because remember that we get a tax revenue out of the GDP growth rate. So like I have stated, every GDP growth rate projection is 2.5 times. The tax revenue projection should be 2.5 times the real GDP projection, which is the real, plus the inflation rate, which will give you the nominal growth rate of tax revenue. So I think that it is within that bracket that the discussion is. And I agree with my co-panelists that it is true that we have been missing our targets each year. And the problem became so much since 2013. We've been missing our targets here and there. I think it's a question of more of our tax compliance, being serious with our tax revenue mobilization. I'm focusing on tax revenue because the non-tax revenue sometimes is not stable. So you cannot really make projections about the non-tax revenue. That's why my focus is on tax revenue, because about 82% of revenue is coming from the tax revenue. So it makes sense to place much emphasis on tax revenue. So given the fact that next year the government is able to be serious and enforce tax compliance, ask people to file their returns, marry digitization with revenue mobilization, and then also make sure that certain public goods will require the TIN or the Ghana card. So, for example, it can be a law that before you register your car, you must show your TIN, or you can show something to show that you are really regularly paying your tax. I think that it's something that the government can use to enforce tax revenue mobilization, that trying to connect the use of public goods with revenue mobilization. I've given you a typical example that if you go to register your car or want to get a number plate, then you must show how compliant you have been in terms of tax payment. Another example is the PSHS. There are so many examples that we can look at that, we can marry the tax compliance with the use of public goods. The next one is the digitization. I think I mentioned the digitization. Digitization should be, it should give us more benefit as a country, because I think the government has spent so much. And my brother is talking about property rate. If somebody comes to my house that is coming to collect my property rate, and if he wants me to pay in cash, I will not pay. And I'm not sure many Ghanaians will pay. Because if you pay in cash, they will go and misapply it. But if it's through digitization, for example, you can pay online, use your credit card, use your debit card, use Momo, you can have something *14 something hash, and then you pay, and then it goes directly into the accounts of GRA. All these things, I think coming next year, the government should enforce all these things so that they can mobilize the needed revenue. And then the leakages that we have been talking about, I think this is also where the digitization comes in, that the digitization will help plug the loopholes that we have been talking about. Again, there are additional tax revenue measures. The property rate has been brought on board. Per my own calculations, I think the property rate can give government about 11 billion Ghana cedis next year if we are serious as a country to collect it and use the digitization platform to collect it. In this case, it will plug all loopholes, and then, the government will get
11 billion. That's huge. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Yes. That is the reason I'm saying that we must use the digitization platform to collect it. Because if you don't collect it, you use interpersonal relations to collect it, you're going to, call for this misapplication of funds, etc., etc. We should be efficient in our revenue mobilization. I think the key question here has always been the efficient, sorry about that, efficient mobilization of our resources. If we're efficient with that, and I'll give you another example again, the road tolls. How long are we going to continue to collect coins on our roads if it is brought back? We shouldn't, if it's the budget projects to bring the road tolls back, it should not come back in its, original form where people were sitting down there collecting coins. Yeah, let's use the digitization platform. If you come to the University of Ghana, there's e-card. If you go to South Africa, there's no even toll booth on the highway. The camera is there. It captures your card is in front of your car. The electronic card is in front of your car. The camera captures it. And if you raise and the card is expired, then the next police station, you'll be stopped. It's all about digitization, because once the camera captures your car, it must transmit to the police. It must transmit to all the agencies, the public agencies, required to mobilize revenue for us, enforce tax compliance. So all these things must be done. So in my view, that we must leverage on the digitization that His Excellency the Vice President has been, preaching about. If indeed government has made so much investment, this is the time to marry revenue mobilization and digitization for efficient revenue collection. My last point on revenue mobilization is that we must make sure that every expenditure that we make as a country, it must give us future revenue. That is what the economic principles tell us. Every expenditure that you make, with the exception of the social intervention programs, of course, that one, you don't want to give livelihood employment against poverty, cash allowance to the poor community, and you expect them to pay tax or bring back the money later. But at least when it comes to road construction, when it comes to railway line, when it comes to any other, public investment, we must have it at the back of our mind that the expenditure that we are incurring should give us revenue in the future. We must always remember this as a country. Other than that, we'll be spending and spending and spending anyhow, and we'll not get any future revenue from that. The other point I want to make, maybe before you give me a next question, is the Heritage Fund. I don't know. I think the honorable MPs in the House, he can help educate me on the rules of Parliament. But I think the Heritage Fund is backed on an act of Parliament. But my position on the Heritage Fund is that we have invested it outside. It is earning us 2% nominal interest rate. When the U.S. Fed rate, U.S. inflation now is 8%. So if you earn 2% on your Heritage and Stabilization Fund, it means you are getting negative real returns on the Heritage Fund and Stabilization Fund. It is not making any economic sense or prudency to invest and receive 2% when the inflation rate in the country in which you have invested is about 8% now. It means you are really losing. What is my proposal? My proposal is that the Heritage and the Stabilization Fund currently is about $1 billion, not cities, $1 billion. It must be brought home. It must be brought home and invested in this country, so that even the government can borrow from the fund. In other words, government is borrowing from itself, because it's better for the government to borrow from the Heritage Fund and the Stabilization Fund locally and pay about 5% on in terms of dollars, than keeping it in somebody's country and earning us 2% nominal and negative 6% real. So I think that we should bring it home. It must be brought home and invested locally. It can be invested in dollars, and then government, instead of going to the labor market to borrow at 9%, 7%, 8%, it can borrow from the Heritage Fund here in dollars and pay 5% or 6% or at an agreeable percentage. Secondly, even if it's brought home, it can be used to buy government bonds, and then the government will pay, just like we have foreigners coming to buy government domestic bonds and government is paying them in the same way. So the Heritage Fund and Stabilization Fund should act as individual entities, so that the government can borrow from itself and pay the interest on it, on the fund. If this is not feasible, then honestly, I think that the Heritage Fund and Stabilization Fund should be brought home and invested in physical infrastructure. Something like railway line. It must be committed to the railway, construction in the country, because the essence of the Heritage Fund is to save for the future generation, and the Stabilization Fund is to show up government when there's a revenue shortfall from the oil sector. And so it is better to construct road that will last for about 100 years. It is better to construct railway line that will last about 100 years for the future generation to come and enjoy, than to keep it in somebody's country and earn negative real interest rate on it. it doesn't make economic, prudency.
Very well. Quite interesting points and suggestions you raised there. I'll come back to Martin, but Franklin, these appear like some wonderful ideas that Dr. Sarkodie has raised, bringing back the Heritage Fund, investing it in Ghana, the issue about the road tolls, the matter of the registration of cars, etc. This appear pretty simple, yet may have far-reaching impact on our revenue mobilization drive.
Well, without a doubt, and I agree with Dr. Sarkodie, by the way, on sending our petrodollars abroad and hoping that they would attract significant returns. I recall almost 10 years ago, we advanced this same debate, this same argument on the cups of oil find, and I think we made the point that, look, we were of the view that it was better to invest the funds prudently here than to keep it keep it abroad where it might not necessarily have the necessary returns. Maybe it's in keeping its own liberal economic thoughts, but I think it is prudent in this part of our world as well, when in fact you look at the fact that the regulations are such that the Minister for Energy at the time could decide how the funds could be utilized, so we thought it was a sensible idea, and it's still sensible today. Of course, the other revenue enhancing measures, including property rates and all of that, are actually long overdue. I mean, these are things that we need to quicken and then enforce immediately, really. While saying that, though, I think it's also quite important to still harp on the point that once you are facing economic challenges or difficulties we are facing, you need to be a bit more modest in terms of the way you project. Look, after Kumi Preku happened in the early 90s, the budget that came after Kumi Preku, the 1995 budget, saw almost something close to a fiscal surplus, right? I mean, the government projected to spend almost $800 million at that time out of an estimated $870 million that was going to be raised. Now, that was almost a 16% comparison to the GDP. I mean, the revenues was almost 16% compared to of GDP at the time. What we are facing now is that we are seeing an expansion in that projection from almost 23% last year to almost 28%, and I did not think that, the two scenarios are almost similar. I do not think that the habit that is being exhibited in terms of prudency is actually quite realistic. And I think that point ought to be made, especially in the light of some of the profligate expenses like the cathedral and other things I've mentioned a while ago. You are still likely to see some increase in the appointments of political appointees at the Office of Government Machinery, while at the same time we are projecting to do either freeze public sector employment and probably do a bit of retrenchment, as the IMF talks as we are hearing from some of the IMF talks. So I think it is important to do a proper rationalization and ask yourself, are there items we can take a fine scalpel and yank off from the budget? And we still submit that rationalization ought to be done. I mean, people have talked about, it looks as if when we say, okay, ministers and ministries ought to be shaved off, people think it is usual political talk. But you see, if you do a proper analysis, you realize that the Ministry for Railways, for instance, and these are low-hanging fruits. There are several of the ministries that can be obviously jointly collapsed, and then collapsed and then put into set. Collapse really, and then some could actually be shaved off. But essentially, we have done some of the number crunching, and we think that even as we speak, we were thinking of almost a 6 billion Ghana Citi discretionary spending that ought to be shaved off. Otherwise, it makes mockery of all the cosmetic shaving that we are hearing about. Some people not being allowed to use their V8s, and then using saloon cars and cutting fuel and all of those things. We've not been told what they yielded in the first place. So how difficult, how convincing is it for us to believe that these baby steps would actually yield any significant returns? So while I agree that we need to mobilize a lot more resources, I think it's also important that we should project that, look, we are in perilous times and we need to be a bit more measured in our expenditure.
So the 6 billion, the 6 billion discretionary spending you talk about, which areas should they be shaved off from?
Well, I mean, if you take a look at the structure of the government, as in the structure of the ministries, we are saying that if you do a rationalization of the ministries, then you're able to shave off quite significantly, not just on the administrative spend, but some of the capital projects as well. You know, there are a lot of capital projects that, if you look at the under the ministry, well, that ministry is collapsed. But if you look carefully at the Office of Government Machinery, almost all the expenditure items under the supposed secretariat that now oversees the Special Development Ministry initiative that hitherto existed are quite clearly wasteful enterprises that you could take a fine scalpel and shave quite a significant amount of. I mean, so, I mean, if it's, this can be easily done. It's not as if we have, as I said, we've done the number crunching and we've looked at the various entities that ought to go and the various capital projects that either ought to be shaved off or significantly delayed. I mean, the Agenda 111, for instance, we think significantly that should be shepherded mostly by the private sector and not having the government putting significant funds up in that enterprise as well, especially when we do know that the procurement processes themselves are fraught with a lot of challenges. There's a combination of public financial management tools being extended or expressed on these expenditure items, given the history of our expenses in this country. And we think it's beyond an academic exercise, but it's actually rooted in reality.
Very well. So the discussion is, I mean, moving into expenditure rationalization. Of course, I know when you come in, you may want to take bits and pieces of what's in the said already. But Martin, government in this budget is announced a number of expenditure rationalization measures. So, for example, it talks about the freeze on employment. It talks about cuts in fuel coupons by some 50%. It talks about, reducing certain kinds of travels. V8 will not be used intra-city. You only use them when you are traveling outside of the capital, etc. And indeed, the government says that it is continuing with its 30% salary cut for all appointees. These are measures that surely will put some difficulty on the persons or the appointees who will be affected. Yet, many think that it is still not enough. What do you think? Are these measures laudable? What else could we be doing to ensure that we deal with our expenditure in a way that reflects our current economic situation?
Well, Selorm, what you've just stated, these things are recycling of the same old broken promises.
We never heard about it. V8. This is new.
V8?
This is new.
Let's check the record. That was one of the first promises the president made when he took office. He said there was a moratorium on the purchase of V8.
Yeah, so the purchase is there.
Yes, they are interlinked.
Yeah.
They are interlinked. How did the numbers of the V8s go up? So you see the first broken promise. When he came, he said there was a moratorium, no more purchase of V8. And this same suggestion that the minister should not travel in V8 in Accra was also generally agreed. Check. So Foriata said he would travel in a saloon car, and the rest of the ministers were to go ahead. Please, can we have the producer check? You see the record. So you said you make these broken promises, came in and bought hundreds of V8s, and now 6 years down the line, you are saying in the 7th year people should not travel in V8 for certain purposes. That's one of the first promises. So you see that the more things change, then the more they remain the same. You came and made a promise, broke it, worsened the problem, then go into the 7th year, you come and repeat the same promise. For me, look, I just told you that this thing, the only thing that will heal this nation, is the trio, Akufo-Addo, Bawumia, Ken Ofori-Atta, leaving immediately. That's the only thing. Then it will bring a new euphoria. It will bring new energy, positive energy, because now the energy, the atmosphere is toxic. The relationship is gone very toxic. They've broken the public trust. They came and they've made themselves very rich. Akufo-Addo just came in, and for every cedi we borrow, his family becomes richer. And you think we'll get positive energy? No, because we are like, what? What is a slap in the face? We booted out John Mahama.
What do you mean by his family? I think the allegation is being...
is it an allegation? Please. It's a fact. Yes, that's his family. It's Ofori-Atta not. Let me tell you,
it's a company on its own. It's a different...
Significantly owned by Ofori-Atta. And look, Selorm, let me tell you, in Chi, there is no name for cousin. In Chi, your cousin is your brother. Okay? So Ofori-Atta is the president's brother. Look, and that's how we understand. The English language is not our mother tongue. And in a lot of languages, people understand. So when Ofori-Atta makes the money from data bank, he's making it for the family. Why do you think the president would allow such an exercise to go on? The Akufo-Addo that we know, look, let's go to Twitter. Akufo-Addo was grandstanding for every city that is lost, for every city that is lost, that is roads not being built, that is hospitals not being built, and so people would die, and all the things he said, grandstanding. And now he's superintending over Ofori-Atta making money from our borrowing. It's because his family is getting richer.
His view is that Ofori-Atta is one of the most competent persons in the financial space.
You should tell that to the Marines.
No, he's done a great
job. Tell that to
the
Marines.
With his own data bank.
Data bank was that small. Please, please. I don't want us to go. I don't want to
investment banks in the country.
Selorm, let's look at the figures. I'm happy Honorable Rickett Higgins is here. When they were in office, Data Bank was learning how to do bonds under Honorable. He's here. Data Bank was learning how to do bonds as an apprentice through the help of the NDC government. What were they doing? Quickly, they'll say, they were doing it even in the previous government. What were they doing? Honorable is here. He said they were paying them $50,000 because they were giving them apprenticeship. Because they were giving Data Bank apprenticeship, $50,000. Then you come into office, and then under LI 2378, that's the Public Financial Management LI, you see that Regulation 165 will tell you that the person who sells the bonds is the Minister for Finance. He sells his bonds. So if the minister is able to sell the bonds through his company, what do you think is happening? Then you go to Regulation 169. It tells you that the selection of the primary dealers and bond market specialists is the ministry. And who sits at the top of the ministry? It's the minister. Can you appoint a bond market specialist or primary dealer without the minister? It's him. You see? So it tells you that these promises, so you see the linkage, these are just recycled promises. Recycled.
They talk about 30% slash in salaries.
Good, let's come.
Yes. In this era of economic hardship, if certain groups of people are having to endure a 30% slash in their salaries, that is quite some sacrifice.
Hi. Selorm, that's just a slap on the wrist. It's a slap on the wrist. Look, anybody who knows the minister, Honorable Rickett is here once again, asking, the salary is nothing. The real money is made in the allowances. The allowances, the travel.
Cut. So the travels will be cut.
Yes.
Fuel coupons will be slashed.
Good.
They can no longer travel in V8 in Accra. Yes. A lot of those things are being touched or slashed.
Selorm, this promise to cut, it started in April, as far as I can remember, April or thereabout. Have they shown you evidence? Check. You even see Professor Jampo consistently, University of Ghana, asking for evidence since it was announced. How much has been saved? How much? And see, going into the budget, they've not been able to tell us how much has been saved since this austerity measure was announced at sometime around April. How much has been saved? So you see, just sloganeering, sir. Look, we've become wiser. So we should stop treating us as fools. Since April, it would have just been wise to show that, we started this policy in about April. This is how much savings has been made so far. You've not been able to tell us and just come and put it in the budget just to deceive us. This is going nowhere. And you see what Franklin said, this thing about the number of ministers being cut. This thing is being said ad nauseum. Everybody is saying it. Everybody. Cut down the ministries. He would not. Even the current 85, we're just lucky that through the elections, because Parliament is hanged, then he was forced to cut down. The first time when he was asked to do it, he said, no, I'm in a hurry. And then he's landed us in such a deep crater. And you think that will take that? Listen, the only thing that will work in Ghana now to get a fresh beginning is that these three people, president, vice, finance minister, they go. Then the constitution provides for early elections. Early elections. Because it says that the Speaker of Parliament should be in office as president for only 3 months. So let's do early elections and then give a fresh mandate. Because once Akufo-Addo has broken all the promises and in the end he has made his family very rich, we will never trust him. The trust is broken. So everything he brings, we will look at with a negative, perception on it. Because we just think that, in all of this, it's just about the family becoming richer. That's it. Because as long as Ufuriata is there and Data Bank is there, it's just, okay, so this 205 billion, you see, they still haven't learned a lesson. They want to borrow more so that their family will get richer. You see it. But when they leave, then we know that, okay, this is a fresh beginning. So let's have early elections. That's it. Let the people, you've broken the trust of the people. So let's give a fresh mandate. Let's have early elections. It's simple. It's provided for in the Constitution because Article 60, Clause 13 says, when the president and the vice president leave, the speaker should stay in office, should come into office, but for only 3 months. And within that 3 months, we should have elections. So right now, the only thing that will save us is fresh elections, fresh mandate, because we can't take this anymore. No, we are dying. Look, people's capital, Selorm, it's not a joke. People's bills have increased. Medicines have increased over 170%. Did you see the work Dr. Kwame Sapon Esedu did at CDD? Medicines have increased about 170%. Look at fuel. Look at oil, kufuor gallon. It's all of these have increased. So we are suffering. So the thing that will save us is that let's have fresh elections. We'll give a fresh mandate. And especially, if we were to do that, the international community is likely to help us because they will see that, yes, once we take off these guys, these bad guys, then they will be willing to help us. Let's read 60 Clause 13. It says, where the Speaker of Parliament assumes the office of President as a result of the death, resignation, or removal from office of the President and the Vice President, there shall be a presidential election within 3 months after his assumption of office. So that's the early elections there. So please, viewers, anybody who tells you that this thing, let's just endure it to 2024. No, that's not what the Constitution says.
But they have a mandate, a 4-year mandate. No. So they can decide to see through the mandate.
No, the mandate is not a fixed 4-year term. It's subject to you having the trust of the people. Right now, they've lost it. You see, the MPs are not in Parliament.
But they don't believe they've lost it. They still think they have it in them to do.
Oh, did you see the, the survey, the poll that came out about early November, the week before we did the Kumi Preku Reloaded demonstration? You see, it said...
The global info analysis.
Global info, yes. The survey confirms it, that Ghanaians say they should go. Ghanaians say they should go. So that's the end of the matter. We don't need to stay for 4 years. We can't endure. Selorm, look, we can't endure this 4 years. We are dying. We're suffocating. No, because it's so brazen, so obscene, that the president's family is getting richer as a result of our borrowing. And you say we should stay in this for another 2 years. No, it can't happen. Please, Akufo-Addo, Bawumia, Ufuriata, just step down immediately. You are not the only Ghanaians. We can't take this. So, Selorm, continue the budget. So this 30%, as I've said, there's no evidence. You announced this policy earlier on. You've not shown us evidence of it, what you've done so far. Then you come and repeat it in the budget. It's not. And then the 2.5 they've done, they want to increase VAT. You know what it's going to have on businesses? Businesses are going to collapse. Already people have lost their capital. Look, let's look at the context. So when I look at it, I say, wow, this is the apogee of insensitivity, eh? That's the apogee of insensitivity. Let's come. People have already lost their... No.
The government needs money to do projects or to stimulate the economy. Now, we can't go borrowing because the international market is being shut to us for various reasons. We can only, raise money domestically. Yes. And they've made us aware that times are hard. Yeah. We all have to squeeze a bit to make sure the economy gets back to normal so we can all enjoy again. So everybody trying to chip in a few more cities is the way to go. Hence, the increase in the VAT, 2.5%. So it is just the responsibility of a citizen to help its state in a difficult time.
No, it's wrong. That is false. The narrative they are painting is false. The context.
We are not in difficult times?
No, we are in difficult, but that we should give more. It's false because everything we have is already been taken. Selorm, let's go back. At the beginning of the year, $1 was equivalent to 6 cedis, 40 pesos. Today, it's anywhere between 14 and 16 Ghana. Do you know that even at the time where the city had gone to about 19 Ghana, they will tell you see the petrol prices. Even the vice president himself said it. See the higher petrol prices. It's because the BDCs were using 19 cedis to $1 to price it. Ask the vice president himself. It's on the record to have said it. So this is a CD that had even depreciated to the extent of needing 19 cedis for $1. So in the process, Selorm, our savings have been shaved off. All Ghanaians automatically, we all took a heavy haircut. People's businesses have shut down. Some are now shutting down. So it's serious, Selorm. Look, I'll tell you, so at the beginning of the year, if you owed, you see, middle class people, mortgages, go and ask people working. People's mortgages, the banks are foreclosing. If you are owing $10,000 at the beginning of the year, so you needed 64,000 Ghana cedis to get $10,000. Today, you need at least 150,000. 150,000. Meanwhile, ask, how much has income increased? The workers, how much has their income increased? Their salaries haven't increased. So you see the organized labor, TUC, see why they are asking for about at least 60% increment. So the 2.5 increment, it just looks out of touch. So where more people are going to die. We can't swallow this. We can't take this anymore. Something must give. They have to just go, then let fresh blood come in. Then we can look at it and see what more we can do.
I see. I wanted to go to Honorable Ricky Hagan, but it appears a lot is being piled on Dr. Mahama here, who speaks for government, for that matter. You know, quite a lot of things have been said that the expenditure rationalization measures announced are not far-reaching. They are not deep enough. They are cosmetic. We should be more daring and do bigger things, like cutting the
from what taxation to what production. Where is the mantra? Didn't you say production?
The issues discussed, of course, we all agree that we are in difficult times. But when Martin behaved like a prodigal, hungry son who doesn't care where the father gets the meals from, to save him, he's at liberty to speak the way he's speaking. And I understand him. I mean, he is representing a kind of a group that is so nucleus and that is so, limited in terms of the issue we are being confronted with. Of course, it's okay.
What do you mean by
No,
that?
I'm not. I understand the budget too. Hey,
I'm not saying you don't understand. No, I'm not saying you don't understand the budget.
I think level 200
I'm not saying that with the greatest respect, with the greatest of respect, a council of good standing, even if you did not do economics, will understand the budget. So I'm saying it's limited in terms of we look at the economic issue not just from one perspective. We look at the basket of things that are being demanded of you, and you try to provide them. He's mentioned several. He's mentioned a lot of several, and the solution lies in look. Let the tribe resign. That is the only solution. But I think that is not the representation of the people of Ghana. And when Mr. Martin says that, he should say that I believe, but not to assume.
But he leads a group.
No, not to assume. The group that came out, the 300 people that came out to represent that particular demonstration. I was in this studio when that demonstration was happening, and your reporter interviewed and asked him. So we are not going into that. We are not going to that. The reporter said, he said that there were 500. The reporter said he can count barely 200 people. I was here.
No, that's not what
you understand. So we should not go into that.
That's not what he said.
Even if they are minority of two, they are Ghanaian people. And that if they have concerns, those concerns must be addressed. But to escalate the concerns of those people to be the representative voice of the people of Ghana is quite unfortunate. That should be the look. Every Ghanaian has the liberty to criticize the government.
But it's not the case that it appears your team is run out of ideas.
No, sir, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to address those specific ideas. And if you mention a point that look, they have mentioned expenditure card. This is only a tap on the wrist. They have mentioned all these measures. Of course, if you're in government and people taking measures to address an economic situation and people don't appreciate it, that is why you are going to face with those criticisms. But come to think of it, political appointees, they are there saying that salary cut of 30% is nothing. But he drew his attention to the fact that it's not only salary cut. allowances are being scrapped off. There's a freeze on housing allowances for most of these particular appointees. There's going to be a cut down 50% of coupons in terms of fuel. Basically, government is asking them.
I hate to do this, but why should government appointees be given fuel? If I were a public sector worker working for the state, I am not giving fuel allowance.
They are giving fuel allowance. Even lecturers are giving fuel. We should not always take the discussion as if political office holders are the only people entitled to fuel.
But how about the quantum?
The quantum should commensurate with the level of activities you do. Okay? So the narrative out there has been that as if it's only the political office holder who take fuel allowance. Public servants take fuel allowance. Public servants take housing allowance. And this is quite trite knowledge. Okay? So to limit the discussion as if political office holders are only beneficiaries of fuel coupons or, housing allowance is not quite sensitive to the work of the politician. Of course, because he's always in the public domain, basically you are asking the public office holder to run the office with his own salary. Salary that you have even put a net freeze on, salary that you have cut by 30%, yet people feel like, look, it's not enough. Of course, when people are feeling the heat and businesses are being affected, it's okay. But we cannot attribute this wholly to the fact that, in the words of the government is super incompetent. And that the only solution, he thinks the only solution is for the government to resign. And the Speaker of Parliament will take over. And that they will do another election. Another government will come. When the government in place has got a mandate, he knows, he's a lawyer of good standard. He knows. He just quoted the Constitution. No, he quoted the Constitution. The Constitution provides for when they resign, when they are impeached, okay, when they are indisposed and they are not able to perform their function, the Constitution provides that the Speaker should take over. But the President has also got a mandate that is determined. It's a determined term by the people of Ghana, not a few of 200 people or 300 people asking for the President to resign. Okay, it is determined by the generality of the people of Ghana. In any case, I can say that 40% of the people of Ghana didn't believe in the president to start with, ab initio. Okay? Because those who didn't vote for the president probably did not believe in the president. And the remaining 50 to 55% believe in the president. Right? So that is the context we are talking about. And even when you were doing that particular exercise, even though the fact that 45 people didn't even vote for the president, 45% of people didn't vote for the president, they didn't even turn up. It suggests that they do not believe in the approach, the measure, the preferred solution, the preferred solution you are given. I'm coming to that. You were even discussing about expenditure rationalization, going to revenue measures, which is quite not even the question you asked. Okay, these are two different things. You asked about expenditure rationalization. We had already discussed the revenue measure, VAT. Okay. I am the least of the person that will not admit that an imposition of even 1% increment in VAT is going to impose additional hardship on the people. Okay? But I'm acutely aware of the fact that government will also need to raise its revenue up in order to address some of the challenges we are faced with. Okay? VAT, of course, is a consumption tax, which is based on, the value added tax, which is basically a consumption tax, right? The impact of these measures is no doubt will be on businesses. But we look at the returns and the net impact of that on growth and what it means for the stability of the economy. Basically, that is what the analysis should be about. But not to take a one-sided approach of say, look, this is going to impose burden on the Ghanaian people. And even to talk about government, spending indiscriminately and making fun. You are just impugning the integrity of Parliament. Because bonds are issued and those international transactions go through Parliament and they vet, the loan advisor, the commission that pay, go through the scrutiny of Parliament. Okay? So to suggest that the finance minister, by the fact that the regulatory, the LI, suggests that he is supposed to issue the bond, he is supposed to appoint a bond manager, and that the control by the finance minister makes it sacrosanct that Parliament cannot inquire. The inquisition of Parliament into the operation of bond market, into the government issue of bond is mute, cannot be true. Okay, so that is the fact that we shouldn't impugn the fact that, look, the finance minister is just sitting down whenever he wants, he awards a contract to his cousin, or the president sits down when he wants, he awards a contract to his brother. That should not be the angle we should be carrying. When we have a discourse, of course, we can throw in the emotion, we can play with the people's emotion, try to whip sentiments of people. No, right?
But it's not a fact that the finance minister's a company he has interest in, Data Bank, gets to benefit anytime Ghana borrows, at least under the watch of the minister.
Is it not a fact that companies have different personality than the person operating them? the legal personality.
No,
you are lawyers.
No.
I'm also asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it not also a fact
that
a company is a separate legal entity or personality than the person? Of course, you can talk of lifting the veil. You can talk of lifting the veil. You can talk of when there are potential conflict of interest. That could be questioned. And that potential conflict of interest has proper channel. He's a lawyer. He has gone to the law. He has gone to the court.
It doesn't stop. The fact that he must go to trial doesn't stop us from discussing.
No, discussing is okay. But that should not impugn that something legally has gone wrong with the transaction. Because if you think that something has fundamentally gone on, there's a potential conflict of interest. Okay, administrative process, the administrative law of the country requires that you can go for the correction. Tell the court that, but the foreign minister doing this with his own company, he's putting the interest of the country at risk because he's likely to jeopardize his personal, the country interest with his personal interest.
Raised enough? Has that matter not been raised enough?
That matter has been raised. No one has been bold enough to confront them, even when the recent attempts by the minority to put the finance minister in that position, when he was given the platform, we all saw what happened. We all saw what happened. And the commentary that came out, the people who were even supporting that initiative. So we always make these debates. We always argue with emotion. We always don't stick to the fact because when you throw it out there, people will not sit down to reflect on the issues. Okay, I believe that if the finance minister is doing something fundamental wrong, the government should be bold enough to take the finance minister out. Civil society organizations should be bold enough to take the finance minister. Parliament should be bold enough to call the finance minister to order.
But all these civil society organizations, etc., they have all spoken.
They have all spoken, and I'm saying that
they've been unanimous and they've been united in their speech.
Speaking is one. There are other requirements that you can use to enforce your rights. Mr. Martin, people did not just speak when the issue of non-bailable offences were in our proof. He went to court. He did not speak.
Yeah,
so he knows the right.
The lawyer decides which approach to use.
No, he knows which. Of course, there are different advocacy measures. There are different advocacy measures. I agree. But
and what he's doing now.
But if we are doing is not giving you the results, I would probably advise that escalate it. If you think that it's not going to cause you embarrassment,
it's a matter of time, isn't it?
It is. That's what I'm saying. I'm challenging him to escalate it. Okay. Escalate it. Let us have finality, and the dragging of the issue for over litigation of this issue in the public domain for far too long is causing us a lot of harm.
Very well.
So that is the point I need to mention. But you mentioned about revenue projection and I was happy that Dr. Sarkodie was right on the point. But my good friend frankly came to say that look, times we have to be moderate. At the same times we need to be up and give in order to meet a program. That balancing act must always be given to Ghana to look. You know that times are hard.
So in your view, that should be the discussion, not the trial.
That should be the discussion.
Not the trial.
Those are the germane issues. Despite whatever it is, the president is still opposed.
Yes.
The finance minister is still opposed. The finance minister is still opposed. How do we ameliorate the suffering of the people? And the government, as we come to this, are taking measures that. Look, when fuel prices were going at the time that he was on the demonstration, fuel prices have come down. He never spoke.
Very well. No, but it's relative because they were at fuel prices.
Yeah, but he made another again. The vice president said that the BDCs are using 19.
No, I'll come back to the matter of oil. So let's take a short break. Let's take a short break. We'll come back and I'll look at the matter of the fuel, the discussion or the proposition of gold for oil. That will be the next thing we'll be looking at. My guests are in the studio and the discussion is getting more interesting. Don't go away, this is the big issue.
What do you get when you mix the best DJs in the country, the most amazing live band sets, delicious cocktails, and wonderful food? Back-to-back hit music from Ghana's finest group Prayer and being serenaded by the brilliantly talented Akwabua. The biggest outdoor party, of course. Situation 2022. Are you ready to party? We're changing the situation on December 24, 2022 with the biggest outdoor party in Accra. The Situation Outdoor Party 2022. Let's Let's wrap up the year in style with the most epic party to end all parties this Christmas Eve with Situation. Make your Christmas Eve come alive with the most incredible DJs who will keep you dancing all night long. Amazing live band sets and the crooner Aquabua. It is the perfect ingredient for the best party this festive season. Ain't no party like a city party, because a city party don't stop. This will be another one to remember. Date Saturday 24th December 2022. Venue La Palm Royal Beach Hotel, Accra. Time 8 p.m. Dress code, it's an all-white affair. For table booking, call 020-5973-973 or 055-8973-973. Book your table and make reservations now. Media partners, Ghana Weekend and Citi FM. This is powered by Citi TV. This is a Beyond the Return event.
You're welcome back to the big issue. We are looking at the budget and matters arising. My guest, Martin Pebu, private legal practitioner, the Honorable Judge Ricketts Hagan, Dr. Kabiru Mahama, Dr. Edu Sarkodie, and Franklin Kujo. These are my guests having the discussion. Before we went on the break, Martin had just thrown a few things into the mix, and Dr. Kabiru took time to explain or to provide some clarity on those. Let me go to the Honorable Ricketts Hagan for a brief response to some of those matters. Then we'll come to the gold for oil matter. I feel it's quite a novel thing, but there are questions around how that particular program will take off and will be managed. Dr. Kabiru said he granted a Bloomberg and Reuters also an interview and is taking over the international media space. He is here, so we will seek some clarity on those. So, Honorable Hagan,
yeah.
I don't even know where to start from, but you know, the issue about expenditure rationalization, people think the measures are not deep enough, V8, cuts in salary, etc. Martin says they are not deep enough, and he doesn't understand how we are going to raise or spend 227 billion when we've not been able to raise that before. Dr. Kabiru thinks that the fact that you missed out on it 5% in the previous year doesn't mean that you shouldn't dream big. Where do you stand in all of this?
Okay, let me guide you where I want to start from, and that is quickly on this. The cousin of the president, obviously benefiting, from this. I don't think that we have actually gone into the real details of this benefit. You see, the issue for me, and it's unfortunate that in the ad hoc committee, this, was basically taken out. But then some of us have worked to get this reinstated, in the debate, and it will come up where we will actually be able to prove it. This thing has moved from potential conflict of interest to profiteering, and we will prove it. Okay, and the data bank actually has never done Eurobond anywhere in the world, including Ghana. On their own, never. They don't have that experience or pedigree. The first Eurobond they were involved, in was the Kufuor Eurobond of 2007. Okay, and then NDC government engaged them again in 2014 Eurobond. All these they were apprentices basically. We call them local transaction advisors, but about 99% of the work was actually done by the international transaction advisors. These local transaction advisors, basically what they did will amount to just reviewing prospectus. To date, Data Bank has actually never done any Eurobond other than being part of this Eurobond exercise in a capacity building, sort of level, if you want to look at it.
Since 2007, they are still building capacity.
Yes, absolutely.
Complementary services.
So for all these years, from 2007 to date, if really they have what we say, if they have really completed their apprenticeship, you would have thought that the last Eurobond, we would have used them instead of going for the international transaction advisors. In fact, even the small amount of Eurobond that they sold in this country, you know, it was agreed that they would take a small amount and sell it in the Ghana Stock Exchange. That one, even the book running of that was not done by Data Bank. It was done by the international, you know, transaction advisors. So basically, their job over the years to 2007 is always been an apprentice, until one day, God forbid, that they will actually, God forbid, in the sense that we stop all this borrowing, so that they don't go and do this borrowing and do this profiteering. We used to charge 0.64. They changed it to 1%, and that 1%, they were still paying the international transaction advisors or all the what is it called? The people who were supplying service to the Eurobond. By that I mean the lawyers, the whatever, all get 0.64. And we were paying the local transaction advisors, the apprentice, 50,000, which they moved to 100,000.
NDC government.
Yes, NDC government. They moved that amount to 100,000. Now the question is the 0.36, which they increased on the variable amount, which is basically a percentage of the proceeds that they get. Who is taking that, or who has taken that money?
So they still take 100,000.
Yes, they still take the 100,000.
And it's been increased to 0.36.
Yes, to make it 1%.
1%.
Yeah.
When did they increase it to 100,000? Was it in
2018?
It was increased in 2018.
Yeah, when they did the first Eurobond. Yes.
Okay. So your question is, where is the 0.6% going?
0.36%, which amount to 46 million. And in today's money, it's 700 million Ghana cedis. Where is that money? Who's even taking that money? Okay, so let's put that aside. We'll deal with that when we get to the censure debate in Parliament.
They cannot debate on something that has not been terms of reference of the
yes, but
he knows that.
It was the speaker's. It's part of the ground.
They lost it at the committee.
We can discuss it here, right?
Yeah, we can discuss it here. We'll talk about it. The report is out, so we know what we'll debate on. So that is something that needs to be proven, and we should not leave that as something that is being dealt with by Siraj and Supreme Court or whatever. This government or this finance minister has made money out of borrowing for Ghana, which has now become a debt overhang. And somebody will have to answer for that.
Very well.
So now let's go to the, we're talking about, we are going on an IMF program where fiscal consolidation is extremely important. By that, you look at revenue as well as expenditure. If you look at all the expenditure measures that this government has taken, they all look cosmetic. Doesn't actually bring any real substance in terms of the cuts that needs to be done. If you talk about the 30% and all that, look, we've been in government before. You know these things, this amount basically doesn't,
a drop in the ocean.
Doesn't matter much to the people whose monies are being. There are people who don't even touch the whole salary. They don't touch it because there are other benefits that they get. That doesn't make the salary, You talk about V8. Who's going to be policing that V8 to make sure that they are not using it? If I take my V8 from home, do you know if I'm going to Parliament or I'm going to Cape Coast? I mean, who is going? If you are really serious, confiscate all the V8 that belongs to government. Put them in a pool, and then go and sign for it. Tell us where you are going with the V8. Not this, lazy way of doing things. And then, in the end, they've not been able to show, even what they've done so far, they've not been able to show us the numbers to see whether these policies are even in as much as, so if we do all these things, all these small inefficiencies in our system and can give us some money, great. But the bigger things that needs to be done, like the size of government and all the cathedral and all these things that we need to cut to give us a chance of recovery, we've not been doing them. Why do you think the rating agencies are still downgrading us? When a budget has come out, a budget which is supposed to signal that we are committed to going on the IMF program for creditors to believe in us, the moment that budget comes out, a rating agency decides to downgrade us to pretty much a junk status. I mean, basically, we are defaulting, or we have defaulted. We are now at C or whatever they put us. And very soon S&P will be downgrading us. They are the most conservative among the three. And since I think we've been downgraded 7 times. You know, the eight actually, but the S&P one was affirmed. It wasn't. We were not actually downgraded. It was affirmed. So 7 since the beginning of the year, January. That should tell you a lot of what is going on. Then what do you hear? You hear the president saying that we should have our own rating agency. Look, the people who the president is not an economist, so I'm not going to. And he doesn't. His
first degree was in economics. He has some understanding of economics.
Well, he has some understanding, you know, hopefully, but probably he has no understanding of capital markets. I don't know when he did his degree, but probably doesn't understand capital market. Okay, but it's not. He doesn't need to understand. The managers of the economy, his principal economic and finance advisors, should be advising this president well. And you see that the president doesn't get good advice. That is why we are asking the finance minister, the economic management team.
Is there anything to be said for what he actually meant, that these rating agencies sometimes don't look upon Africa favorably? And so he made that comment at an AU ECOWAS meeting. So is that not a fact?
Well, maybe that's a fact. But to say that you want to set up your own agency.
No, he's speaking to his colleague, African.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That to suggest to his colleagues that they should have their own rating agency is really not a good idea. Because look, if you want to have your own rating agencies, then borrow from yourself.
From your own market.
Yeah, borrow from your own market. You can't go and borrow from the European market and tell them that you have your own. They shouldn't rate you. You have your own rating agency.
Very well. So move the discussion forward. One of the things that they hope to do to alleviate the suffering of the people is to work on the fuel price. All right. So I'll bring in Dr. Kabiru Mahama about this whole initiative about gold for oil. You know, it's novel. We've seen other forms of barter trades, but now going to buy fuel or oil, finished products or not, with
you only want me to continue on that? And then he
since he's a proponent of that, I'll come back to you on that.
Well, I remember him saying that you know, they put a budget together, so we should be debating it, not them. So
you have to bite, surely on that. So tell us what's, of course, government wants to conserve foreign reserve, and all of that, but why gold for oil? Gold is sold in dollars. Why don't you buy the gold, sell the gold, use the dollars to go and buy the oil?
Yeah, so Selorm, that issue of gold for oil program, of course, as you noted, is quite novel. But before I even give a brief in 5 minutes, if you afford me time to explain that, let me know that the president's comment was based on the notion, which he's a finance president, African risk premium. The rating agency always have what they call African risk premium. Because you're Africa, there's high risk, so we need to slap some premium on you in terms of the rating. That was what the president seeks to address, and his colleagues are also in line with that. So we need to just clarify it. But when I came here, the last time I appeared here, it was subsequent to the president announcement that government was looking to have reliable and affordable fuel supply into the country, and that a team had been dispatched to the United Arab Emirates to hold this discussion. The discussion around it has been, how do we ensure there's some stability and affordable fuel prices? Now, government came with this particular innovative idea of saying, look, we are blessed with natural resources gold, whose price stability has been very known. In fact, we've never had depreciation of the gold for decades, and that the volatility of gold is actually it is flat. We don't have depreciation of the gold. Now, we have another commodity, which is fuel, which is very volatile. Now, if you are having an arrangement where you are going to swap a relatively stable with another relatively unstable commodity, there's going to be some stability in that particular relatively unstable commodity. That is trade learning. But there is also another issue. BDCs do not use the spot exchange rate, and that even helped me to address the point noted by the vice president. The vice president stated in the last window, November, BDCs use a forward exchange rate of 19.5 of 19 Ghana Cedi to the dollar. When the spot exchange rate at that time they were doing it was around 13, 14. Okay, why do they do that? The rationale the rationality behind that decision is that we don't want to sell the product at the current spot rate, so that when we are going back to buy, we can't buy because of the depreciation of your system, which is quite understandable. But where you have stability of your currency and you are feeding in your own speculation into the foreign line, you put it at a higher rate. Government want to insulate that particular forward exchange rate. And how do you do it? You then buy the product and pay with a spot price, which is the goal. How would government carry out this particular initiative? The advantage of this is that, one, because it removes the forward pricing regime. And once you do away with the forward, that means that you are paying spot price. And mind you, prices of the product has been declining from 1,200, 1,200 about to 900 per metric ton of diesel. Okay, and petrol is also on the downward trend in the international market. However, you have this forward pricing regime always feeding into the calculation of the domestic price we pay. If it was just a liter equivalent to $1, we would have been paying for 13 Ghana Cedi for product, even lower, because the liter is now lower than $1. So if a liter is lower than $1, that means we are expected to pay less than 13 Ghana Cedi as of spot exchange rate. Now, government want to do away with the spot. Government also want, when we introduce measure, we want to do away with the with what we call the erratic nature of the instability of the foreign exchange system. And two, we want to conserve our foreign exchange, as you mentioned, because if we spend 400,000 every month, 400 million every month to support this import, but a country that has to do this particular program must be aware that you are dealing with some partners, IOTCs, that is international oil trading companies. These companies should be comfortable in that particular regime, that when you are bringing your product and you are bringing the product, in fact, another advantage of that is the premium. Because the market is always in the forward, they put some premium. So the premium, if you are buying on the spot and you are paying maybe instantly, you are going to get a discount on the product. And that discussion about affordable and cheap, and people say there's no cheap fuel anywhere, is because, look, the price is determined by the market. And because there's some premium on it, if you are able to do away to have a discount on the premium, your fuel will be cheaper or relatively cheaper. Okay, so this has been the pathways of cost reduction for the fuel. And government started the negotiation. Some international oil trading companies have been contacted. This idea has been sold to them. Some of them have expressed interest.
But Enoch says they've never been contacted. They've never had any discussion.
Who at Enoch said it?
We don't know. But
so that's a simple question. That's a simple question. We are saying that if some discussion has been had with management of, say, what you call Citi TV, and you come to interview a worker who is not probably aware of the discussion.
But I'm not sure Bloomberg would just go and speak to somebody insignificant.
And you are not sure government will not engage Enoch and say they have engaged it. So that's the problem. Bloomberg is just like a news channel, right? Yes. If they are telling you Enoch was contacted, the question you should ask yourself, a reasonable person should ask yourself, who was contacted at Enoch?
They said the source didn't want to be named.
The source didn't want to be named. If a source did not want to be named, that means the source is not even confident of what it is saying.
No, it could be that they've not taken a decision to go public.
And I'm saying that, in fact, even said the negotiation, this negotiation is not even good to be putting up names of people you are engaging with in the public.
the reason why they did not name
No, exactly the reason why people, if they were going to put that in public, they should have told us, the Ghanaian public, who they contacted at Enoch. Because you cannot leave the Ghanaian public to want to believe you.
So your point is that indeed you had a discussion with Enoch.
And I'm
Enoch
saying that my point is that
the
government had a discussion with not just Enoch, with several organizations, international oil trading companies. This discussion is going on well. People have expressed interest, not just even those who are in the public domain. Other agencies have expressed interest in this whole regime. And personally, after the interview, people sometimes contact me on this initiative, how novel they want to be participating in this initiative. Okay, that issue about Enoch being contacted, they say they are not aware. We should just jettison that, because that's not the key issue. The key issue is that has government made some effort? Yes. Has government contacted some international oil trading companies on this? Yes. Has government reached some kind of understanding about the future of that particular program? Yes. Has government agreed that this initiative is capable of sustaining itself? Because if you are having your gold export from small-scale miners and then large-scale miners can be equivalent to 400 every month, 400,000 worth of gold, 400 million worth of gold every month.
Yes.
It's supposed that this product can change itself. And when we do that, argument have always been raised. The government is looking for foreign exchange. Why will you then swap? Because you will not build your foreign exchange. These are money that do not even come to government anyway.
Yes.
Because mining companies send the product outside of the country, but they don't repatriate the money back. So the argument that the money would come back and
so on the face of it,
on the face
like a good arrangement.
On the face of
it, happened to BDCs. Will the Bank of Ghana be ready or willing to provide forest cover for them if they want to go get their own oil from their own sources?
So now, because we are operating a liberal, the Bank of Ghana will be willing. Of course, when you want to implement such a program, there will be carrots. The carrots are those to entice the people or the BDC to want to subscribe onto the program. And if we have, say, if we agree, for instance, with BP, which is one of the major, where it is dominating the market in terms of our relationship with them, if we have a discussion with, say, ENOC, if we have this discussion with them, it's supposed that we have at least 90% of the market being covered. Now, the remainder of the 10%, the remainder of the 20%, whatever the number is, will then be in the position for the Bank of Ghana to deal with. But not that if they go through that route, they cannot be competitive in the domestic market. So it makes sense for them want to subscribe to the program because now they will be buying in dollar. They will still be want to be forecasting it. One important thing I want to note about this thing is that, and Honorable mentioned about the fact that inflation is not the reason why Bank of Ghana hike the interest rate, the policy rate is not just for inflation, because you want to preserve their currency. If Feds or Federal Reserves are hiking their interest rate, the reasonable thing is also to make sure that the value of the investment in your currency also goes up. And that is why you also hike your interest rate. That is other reason. So with this particular measure, government will be able to control inflation. Of course, he mentioned about the issue about inflationary pressure by the Bank of Ghana trying to buy the gold in Ghana Citi, and there will be some injection of Citi into the domestic market. That inflationary pressure will be there. But if you take the Switzerland, okay, for instance, who have been engaged in this gold purchase program, gold purchase as well reserves. If you look at the central bank, the London central bank in UK, England's Bank of England, okay, all these people have been doing reserves in gold, and they are using their pound sterling, they are using their Swiss franca to buy the product. That has not, the analysis we have seen so far has not actually triggered inflation so much in those particular countries. But government is well aware that there's a potential risk of inflationary pressure by this particular measure. But you can offset it by the stability of fuel prices. Because if you have fuel prices be one of the determinant or key drivers of inflation in your country, and you are able to have some stability in fuel price movement, because you are not using spot exchange rate. In addition to that, you are not losing the premium that they used to charge on you. You'll be able to have some stability in the fuel market. So if you have stability, the Vice President also mentioned it is not only for the inflation, but even utility price regimes. If you come to the formula used by the PURC in the determination of utility prices, inflation and exchange rate has been one of the parameters or inputs into that calculation. Now, if you have a relatively low inflation or exchange rate regime with this particular measure, it is going to also ensure stability in the market. Essentially, by this particular measure, we are freeing up close to 400 million every month for other, for our reserves or domestic reserve, in order that other people who need them will be able to use them.
Very well. I know there's a lot to say about this. Dr. Sarkot, if you are still there, is this an economically viable proposition from government, gold for oil? Just in 2 minutes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. The economic principle underlying barter system or barter trade is what we call the double coincidence of want. I understand that it is a novel idea. The government is trying every possible best to control prices of food and energy and keep the value of our city intact. So whatever we have to do to get that resource is applauded. And so my issue on the double coincidence of wants is what I think we have to bring into the discussion. So if I have tomatoes and you have pepper, and I need your pepper, you should need my tomatoes. So if we have gold and the oil sellers have oil, they should be in need of our gold. The reason being that's why we said we call it the double coincidence of want. If the want is just one-sided, if it's only Ghana who has gold and wants the oil, If it's just one-sided, it's not going to work. But if it's a double, if the oil seller also has oil and he is in need of our gold and is willing to sell the oil for our gold, then that double coincidence of one will occur, and the barter system as we have now will work perfectly. The inherent in the double coincidence of one is the additional cost or transaction cost. So, for example, if the oil seller, for oil seller to be in a position to say that I want it or I don't want it, he also calculates his cost. So, if you give him gold, does he have storage for it? Is he willing to store the gold? Is he willing to sell the gold in future for dollars and then go and use the dollars to make whatever transaction that he wants to do? So my emphasis here is that the double coincidence, it should never be one-sided. If the oil producers are also in agreement with this arrangement, then fair enough, it's a perfect agreement, and I think we should support it. In addition to this, I think you mentioned the inflationary pressure if the Bank of Ghana is going to buy it. That is why some of us have been preaching about the government owning the resources. I have said it time and again. Botswana owns 55% of its diamond. Nigeria owns 51% participation interest of its crude oil production. Ghana owns only 16% of our oil. And then the gold, I'm not sure, is even up to 16%. So if the government of Ghana has its own mining company in the country, it would have been much easier for the government to just get its gold and exchange for crude oil without necessarily worrying about using cities to go and buy gold and then come again and go and exchange, and the process goes on and on. So I think I've mentioned two things, the double coincidence of ones, and then in future, the government should have its own mining company if they intend to sustain this. And the whole idea is to control prices, stabilize prices, because the exchange rate, in my view, is the major driving force behind the inflation that we have.
Very well.
It's driving prices of fuel, utility prices, etc., as you have said in your remark.
Very well. Great one. Thanks so much, Dr. Sarkodie. Dr. Kojo Asante, the CDD, is just joined this discussion. He'll be speaking more on the second topic, but he's here. So let's pick his thoughts on this. Doc, welcome to the program. I know you've been following the matters. This gold for oil swap deal or barter deal appears, it is actually novel. Do you have anything to say about this? What's your impression about it? It will obviously drive down the price of fuel if successful.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to everybody. I would not attempt to speak about it. There are economists, more people experienced who can tell us, whether it's a good idea or not. But I actually wanted to, touch on the cuts, the deep cuts that we have to make, because I really feel that we're still skirting around the surface, given the crisis that we are almost unprepared to really deal with the expenditure side in a very serious way. And a lot has to do with just the cost of running government overall. And we have to look at that in very, very serious terms. I mean, currently, between your interest payments and your wages and maybe some of your statutory payments, that's everything all of the money that you have is taken, and we can't borrow. So the only place we can really look at is the expenditure side. What I've seen so far, I think doesn't go far enough. I think we definitely need to reduce our number of ministers, and with all of the attendant, benefits and things that come with it. I think currently it's about 85 of them. We did some calculation. You can go to about 60. Some people think you can do 50. But even if you just keep one deputy minister for all of the ministries, I think we have about 5 ministries that can go. We don't need railways. We don't need a public enterprises ministry. There are some ministries that we can do away with. And then all of the secretariats under the Office of Government Machinery should be absorbed by the relevant ministries, FSHS, 1D, 1F, all of can go back to trade. All of those things, can be done. And then the staffing at the Office of the President is very, very high. So, government, with all of the measures that it's trying to take to raise revenue and the tax impact, that is going to have, the financial impact going to have on citizens with VAT, income tax, all of the other things that are being added. We have to see a real demonstration from government that it is also going to behave like it is in austerity. And at the moment, I am not seeing it. The discretionary cuts, reduction, 30%, all those things don't really do it for me.
I see.
There has to be a mindset that we have to cut our coat according to our size. And so far, those signals have not been given.
I see. Thanks so much. We'll get back to you. Franklin, gold for oil.
Well, first of all, it's not necessarily novel. I think it's technically feasible, but it's not novel. As far back as the 1940s, the Saudis were, the American government was already doing something like that with gold producers, with oil producers, by the way. And I think in the 70s as well, it was done significantly. At some point, what sort of stopped it at a point was when the price of the barrel of oil moved from $3 to about $12, and somehow people then abandoned it. But I think even in the mid 2000s up until 2016 thereabouts, even 2018, some Turkish and some India and Iran and co have also actually done something similar. For me, I think the challenge really has to be one. What I question is, if you are buying 20% of gold from the gold companies with Citis, is it presupposed that when they are sending back their
repatriating their profits?
Repatriating their profits, would it be in Citis? I suspect we need to have that net effect transactional net effect analysis also ought to be made, because eventually they would have to repatriate their money in dollars anyway. The other point also has to be, what happens if the price of oil actually moves overnight, when we know how these things happen globally? I think we need to factor those actually in as well, because the argument about spot prices could be defeated by overnight movements when we do not have control over some of these incidents, by the way. And I think the other point I also need to probably ascertain would be, is it the case that all of these oil, when bought, will be transmitted through the government's own, maybe GOAL will do the distribution, and then somehow would benefit, everybody else would benefit, and then BDCs would necessarily have to compete because they may have to buy theirs from elsewhere? Would the Bank of Ghana continuously support the BDCs to also decide that they either want to be part of this deal or they want to buy from other places? The competitive element would also have to be factored in.
Very well.
And I think finally, why are we doing all this dance when we can easily just resource Tor to refine oil? I think that's it, because we spend taxpayer money, several millions of dollars. We've been collecting taxes in order to refine oil in this country, and we never really get to do it.
I
think we should, yeah.
All right, great one. Thanks. Honorable Rikisegan, yes, I see you were noting down a number of things. Of course, unfortunately, our time is fast spent.
Right.
So
okay.
if you could put that quickly together.
Yeah,
for me,
quickly. Selorm, the gold for fuel idea is one of the, it's a daft idea, extremely daft.
Wow, why so?
And anybody in modern economics will tell you, look, this is a government that said to us that they are moving us from where Gadgisburg economy to a modern day economy. Now they are taking us from Gadgisburg to Stone Age economics. And to suggest, yes, as what's his name, just said a few minutes ago, Frank said a few minutes ago that this was practiced in the 1940s. So, look, this is what was done in the Stone Age. You know, the person who came up with this idea of barter trade, Dr. Baumia, you remember him in the Sino-Hydro time, bartering bauxite and, and then they come again. This is the problem. The managers of the economy don't actually understand the economy they are managing or the modern day economics that it's happening at the moment. Let me tell you why it's not workable. It doesn't even make sense. Okay? Look, the world has changed from the barter days where you can take tomatoes to exchange onions. Now, most of these things we are talking about are actually priced in the international market. Now, ask yourself, why would somebody want to give you oil or a finished product, in this case, a finished product for you to give them gold? Now, how is it going to be priced? Are they going to decide at their own discretion that we are giving you this? It will obviously be related to what the international price is.
It is, yeah.
Okay, now, why would you want to do that? You are on your simple solutions are there, and this government is not looking at it. We have talked about a windfall issue. They never listen to it. We talk about so many other issues. Now, you produce oil. Okay? And then now you say you are going to use gold to buy somebody's oil cheaply. The cheapest oil you can find in the market is your own oil.
That's $1. They don't want to amass dollars.
You don't need to. Okay? If you do that and say you don't want to amass dollars, look, the gold, when we take the gold out, what do we use the gold? We sell the gold for what?
Dollars.
For dollars. And now we use those dollars basically first and foremost to pay for our international debts, okay, because it is easier when you have a dollar revenue to use it to pay your dollar debt than to use your domestic, especially if your currency is moving against you. Now you are using the dollars that you are going to earn, which will pay for your dollar debt.
But there's timber, there's bauxite, there are other things which will bring the dollars.
Well, if it's enough, we wouldn't be where we are. It is clearly not enough.
But obviously, the oil takes a chunk of that, a big chunk of that.
Look, it really doesn't. The simple solution, let me give you what the simple solution is to end all this dancing around, as Franklin said, about this problem, which they have complicated the problem. This is a very simple problem. We all know that the world market has moved against us in terms of the fuel prices and all that. And we have it in our hand as an oil-producing nation to address this problem in a much better way than this complication.
But we don't control that much of our oil.
Well, if you don't control that much of oil, you get a bit of it. Okay, so your bit, use your bit to process, to ask store to process it, to feed your own market. Okay, that you wouldn't be involving any dollars or anything here. Now the question is that when you spend this money, and when you deprive yourself of the gold dollars that you get to service your debt, you are then pushing yourself to use local currency to service that debt, which will be a cost to you because of the depreciation, which otherwise will not be, even if the city depreciates and you are earning dollars somewhere to pay for your dollar debt, it is not as bad as coming home to take cedis to go and pay for that.
I get that.
And then when you get the oil, what oil are they talking about here? Look, you control. There is a reason why nations have state institutions or institutions that belong to the state. You have gold, which belongs to the government. And if Ghana, we don't do forward or future pricing because we don't have a futures market. Therefore, people speculate what they think the future price will be and use it to price their oil, which obviously some are profiteering from this. Use gold. Give gold the dollars, Bank of Ghana, for gold to bring the oil in. Gold sit with NPA to agree on what the price is based on the amount of money being given to them. And they come and price their oil at what we think is the reasonable price without any profiteering, and see what will happen to the other OMCs. They will have to compete. So if you want to compete,
support oil to do that.
Yeah, then the Bank of Ghana will also support you if you will sell your fuel at what we think the right price is determined by MPA, not what you have determined. Instead of carrying this gold to what is it called? I don't know whether the guys who went to do the exploration actually went with gold. To go and use gold and then bring oil and all this they're complicating the matter.
Very well. I'll give you 1 minute. All right. So just
actually, I know 1 minute.
Martin has ceded his time to you. Your good friend Martin is ceded.
So sorry, can I just make one quick point about what the doc said about this heritage fund? I pray that doesn't happen. The heritage fund obviously will be in 10 years or something since we put this petroleum revenue thing together. It needs to be reviewed, but and then it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that that money should be sitting elsewhere and all that, but it should never be brought home to be used as a place to borrow money from.
Okay.
There will be nothing left in that heritage fund.
So
all right, just 1 minute.
Yeah, I'll try to do that within 1 minute, 30 seconds. The issue about this arrangement is like most of the issues raised are based on the fact that most of the commentators don't even have an insight as to how this arrangement is ongoing. And because of lack of that clarity, they are bound to speculate. Government is going to engage. A consultative subcommittee has been set up, and various people will be engaged to addressing this issue. And this issue about Nana, you hosted me with Nana Amosi, or the second, or the last time. They raised the very issue about his suggestion that if you give opportunity to go out, you are pride yourself in liberal market. Why do you have to give advantage to go out by making it all? So they raise those issues. But when they come back, he will support them, forgetting that he made this. There's another issue about toll processing. Currently, toll will process all the approval, but they will cost at more expensive price than we import.
So it's not a lost case at all.
No, it's not a lost case. It's not a lost case. Government is working to revitalize by injecting private sector participation in order to make it much more effective. So that is not a lost case. He's talking about buying oil. Why not our oil? That links out to that. Better days are over, and that is a daft idea. I don't agree with it, because this arrangement.
Somebody is asking me. Ruben is asking whether you know of gold standard monetary policy system. He said it was around this time that barter trade was actually.
No, but gold standard monetary. That was where we drifted away to using the.
I will refer you to
using the gold.
Stone Age economics.
But you see, they don't understand this. They don't understand this because we call commodity swap and liquefy commodity swap. Okay, liquefy commodity swap is a variant of commodity barter exchange, but it is liquefied because there is some intermediary involved. All those numbers are worked out, and that's what with the engagement. If they are willing to learn, if they are willing to support it, they will be able to understand.
So the engagement is important.
Better. Yes. So the arrangement is not only for both. There's a question about whether we are only using GOEL or Go Energy. In fact, government, because the government policy, GOEL both will be one of the anchors, but other people will be invited to participate. 20% of our oil revenue, as my brother from Kukudio mentioned, that look, the 20% is not. They will not. Repatriate that. Why? Because
that's a mining.
Because they also need CD for the payment of domestic staff, for administrative staff, and all this. So that is money they will need in Ghana cedi anyway. So they will not need to go back and change it to dollar in order to project. That's why they have opportunity to sell 80%. And that will be in dollar, and they can keep that in their. Also, government is trying to exercise the right of bringing it back before you repatriate. So that is also one of the measures. But there's no time. Issues about ownership of minerals and all those.
So I'm sure that engagement is important. That engagement should happen. Yeah. This is a big issue on 97.3 Citi FM and on Citi TV. We'll get back and talk later about the what happened in court on Thursday, where the court rejected Atuesian, that's the former MD of the different capital banks, the former founder of the different capital banks, 19 million cedi restitution offer agreed between his side and state prosecutors. Why? We'll find out whether indeed, as the court said, it makes corruption attractive. Should the court accept that? The big issue will return after this. Don't go away.
My name is Gina, and this salon is where I work. Good morning to those who speak good English like I do. That's B, Assistant Madam. always cleaning boss.
Ifya, so can't you sweep the place? Do you know what I went through last night? I had to uninstall the whole of the night, but I managed to be here today.
That's Ifya. She's in the Guinness Book of World Records for giving the most excuses.
I am not missing any drama today.
Ow! You're burning my scalp!
Baby, I messed up again. Oh. My family riches. I'm sure they've located the salon.
Hey, don't come and prophesy on me. That's Hannah, always acting religious.
I didn't see you on Sunday. I hope it's not about that gentleman.
Is he cheating?
If he was just cheating, it wouldn't have been a problem.
He bought that foolish girl a car.
Sometimes you just have to figure out things you are doing or not doing right.
Especially with the bedroom things, maybe you're not doing it right.
Ask God for more spouse.
A grandma is back. Look, today I have hip pad and Botox pad.
You like this? Your Botox is like my pump.
Which part of your body do they want?
I'm Gifty, the owner of this salon.
Good. Now that's our boss.
Hey!
Last time the week we came to pick, you still haven't brought the money.
Ask Gina, I paid her.
She's all you know.
You've already met your new colleague, have you?
Are you straight?
No, I'm not. I'm crooked.
The Hairdressers returns on 7th December 2022 at 7:30 p.m. only on Citi TV.
You're welcome back to the big issue on 97.3 FM. We're on Citi TV, also on DSTV channel 363, Go TV channel 182. My guest this morning, Dr. Kojo Asante, Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement with the CDD, Franklin Kojo, President of Imani Africa, Dr. Kabiru Mahama, Technical Advisor Office of the Vice President, Honorable George Ricketts Hagan, MP, Cape Coast South, Martin Pebu, private legal practitioner. Now, this week, the High Court, or the High Court, presided over by Justice Eric Che Bafo, a Court of Appeal judge sitting as an additional High Court judge, rejected an agreement between the state and founder of defunct Capital Bank, Atoisen, for a refund of 90 million cedis, alleged stolen money. That was money that was advanced to the bank as liquidity support by the Bank of Ghana. Indeed, the Bank of Ghana advanced about over 600 million to that bank. And so the judge was of the view that if the state or the court is to bless that arrangement between the state and the accused, it would make corruption very attractive. For that reason, the judge, who was due to deliver his judgment on that day, said they should go and relook at the arrangement, get back to the court on the 13th of December to convince him on the law and on the terms of the deal so he can make a determination of the matter. Anti-corruption crusaders have lauded the judge for that particular comment or view of the matter. Dr. Kojo Asante is one of those. Martin Pebu in the studio is also one of those. Let me start with Martin. Martin, what do you make of Justice Che Bafo's view on the matter? The parties had agreed on what they felt was reasonable. Why did the judge have to reject that? Because what we know is when terms of settlements are often reached, the judge most often only adopts that and the parties go their way. Why did he have to reject this offer?
Okay, so straight answer is that Section 35 of the Court Act says that he must find the offer satisfactory to him before he accepts it. And it's not only this Act 459, but it's also in the Office of Special Prosecutor Act. You know, the Office of Special Prosecutor, we've made provision for such settlement. But in these ones, the judge too should look, because it helps, you know, so that there's somebody else superintending when the two parties have reached an agreement, it's good for a third party to also scrutinize. So that's a simple answer. Selorm, what I would beg is that because the matter is still before court, I don't want us to go too much into the nitty-gritties.
Yes.
Lest it will just poison the atmosphere. So I like to look at the positive side. Yes, I know there are some downsides here and there, but for now we'll emphasize the positive side. And the way I see the positive side is this. You see, the judge is saying that the figure is low. At that time, it was a dollar was about 3 cedis. Today, as we said from our last session, you see the dollar is anywhere above 14 cedis, right? Yes, so he thinks that the value. They just said 13. I'm saying 40. It's even 19. I want to use 19. The BDC. I'm like the BDC. I want to use 19. Kabiru, you're not correct. Yeah, so you see it. So looking at it, let's look at the positive side. The judge wants to get value for money for Ghana. Yes, I know it's hard. I know it's hard for Mr. Twasian because some of the materials I've read, you see, the part I can emphasize, as I say, I don't want to go too much into details. The part he admits through the agreements is that he says it's 27.5 million that he is willing, he admits that it's with him, and so that one he will refund, right? And so they're saying that the rest of the money, bringing it up to 90 million, part of it is reparation and all that, right? Yes, so that's how Mr. Essien sees it. I've seen a number of court documents and all that, but as I said, I don't want to punch too much on them so that we don't poison the atmosphere. So because he's at 27.5 million, and so he has had to come up to 90, he sees it as it contains the reparations and everything, right? Because you see the section 35, when we read it, so to talk about compensation, restitution, and reparations. They all don't mean the same. So you compensate what you took, you are bringing it back. So that's a restitution. Then you also do reparations. So what would you do to, what do you call it, make it good for the people? Because that's our money that's been taken. So then you'll be looking at how to give interest and all that. That's the compensation bit, you see. So what I see is that if he ups his offer now from 90, he makes it at least more than 30 million more. It's likely. It's likely because that's what the judge, that's the main thing. Because as for the other issues about 35 not being applicable and the rest, you see other proceedings where the judge was willing to go with them. Yes, and it's on record. So I think the main thing he's referring to is the figure. Because you see where they've reached. And you see, where this thing has been brought out into the public that there's an agreement. And the agreement, you see, he says, yes, I'll change my plea. At this time, we cannot make it such that he'll go back and say he's changing his plea, let the case go on. No. That's why I'm saying that all the other arguments, I've seen things that if we were to say, it will charge the atmosphere, which I think we shouldn't do. Let's make the atmosphere congenial for them to be able to conclude the negotiations. So the positive side I see is that the judge is saying, look, this thing is insufficient. At the time, this 90 million that's going by prosecution. So the total case prosecution put up is that he has about 192 million. Out of the 192, the accused is showing that part of that money is with Sovereign Bank. You see, but they took it to give to Sovereign Bank to buy shares and the rest. So he's been able to show that from Capital Africa Group, they issued checks to Sovereign Bank. Yes,
that also collapsed.
And that 100 million is in the books of Sovereign Banks. It's not with him, right? So he now says that what is with him is the business promotion. That 27.5 million.
Which he might have used for business promotion, really.
Well,
we don't know.
That one, yes. But out of that, he even refunded 1.3 million to Iyoko. That's leaving 26.2 million because it's 27.5 million. And when the matter started around 2018, he refunded 1.3 million to Iyoko. So leaving 26,200,000 with him, right? So now out of that 26.2, he's bringing, 90 million. So he sees it as
making up for the exchange losses and all of that.
Yeah, so there is something to be said for that. But ultimately, me sitting where I do, as I said, we want a positive and happy ending. We think that I'm thinking that if he ups the offer anywhere in the region above 30 million, so that if it's above 120 million, I'm sure they should be able to settle somewhere. You say it, yes, once he ups it, 40 million extra, 50, going, the more it goes up, because it's a Selorm. You are a lawyer, you understand it. Where with Rich, a judge is coming to court, he has a judgment to read, and you see that all the comments point in a certain direction then.
Yes.
So it looks very tacky if they were to withdraw, and then he reads, no.
So would you say that this was a smart move by the Taxation team to throw in this at this time?
Smart, I have to think a lot more about it. So let me run away from the word smart. But what we are sure of is that, let's quickly add this. Selorm, you know that at the section 35, okay, it says that he's going to be convicted. Section 30, let me paraphrase.
I have it.
35.5.
Let me just read the 35. Let me read everything.
Okay, let's go 5 first, so that people would, and then before it comes
where the court considers 5, where the court considers the offer to be satisfactory, the court shall accept a plea of guilty from the accused and convict the accused on his own plea, and in lieu of passing sentence of the accused, make an order for the accused to pay compensation or make restitution and reparation.
Excellent.
So that's 35.5.
Yes, the other part, let me make this point, then you can read. So the point I want to tie in before you read the whole thing is that, please, as Ghanaians, let's watch this, that he's going to be convicted. So for those who are saying that, no, at all costs he should go to Selorm, he should go to jail, I'm begging that, let's look at it. It's going to come with a conviction. So record, when next time he's going to fill a visa to go to the US or UK, have you been convicted? That book, you have to check. Yes.
But we don't know whether he'll be convicted.
On appeal.
On his own plea.
Yes. And so that also carries with it. When you go into the constitution, he can't become an MP or government until after 10 years. You see, so those qualifications. And then also in the agreement.
Even given his current situation,
excellent. Under the banks and specialized deposit taking institutions. They've even written in the agreement that he won't be a director again. So if you add this, it's a lot. He's going to suffer a lot. So I'm begging that let's slow down on the jail. But rather, let's get more money, maybe 50 million, 60 million extra or more. But now they are going to do further negotiations, right? That's better because you see the what do you call it? Abu Gapile. Abu Gapile went to jail and came. Did we get the money? You see the other one that they did, the lawyer Lassie's case. They said they got only about 1.5 million. The rest they've not had. So this one, if we're going to get such a huge sum of money, it's good. We can build schools, hospitals, and the rest. And he'll still suffer a lot. But now you can read the rest of the section.
Okay, so let me read the full section 35 of the Courts Act for the benefit of everybody. So 35.1 says, for where a person is charged with an offense before the High Court or a regional tribunal, the commission of which has caused economic loss, harm, or damage to the state or any state agency, the accused may inform the prosecutor whether the accused admits the offense and is willing to offer compensation or make restitution and reparation for the loss, harm, or damage caused. 2. Where an accused makes an offer of compensation or restitution and reparation, the prosecutor shall consider if the offer is acceptable to the prosecution. 3. If the offer is not acceptable to the prosecution, the case before the court shall proceed. 4. If the offer is acceptable to the prosecution, the prosecutor shall, in the presence of the accused, inform the court, which shall consider if the offer of compensation or restitution and reparation is satisfactory. 5, which I read earlier. Where the court considers the offer to be satisfactory, the court shall accept a plea of guilty from the accused and convict the accused on his own plea, and in lieu of passing sentence on the accused, make an order for the accused to pay compensation or make restitution and reparation. 6. An order of the court under subsection 5 shall be subject to such conditions as the court may direct. 7. Where a person convicted under this section defaults in the payment of any money required of the person under this section or fails to fulfill any condition imposed by the court under subsection 6, any amount outstanding shall become due and payable, and upon failure to make the payment, the court shall proceed to pass a custodial sentence on the accused. So this is what the law says. Dr. Pumpuni Asante, the judge in his ruling said he fears if the agreement as presented by the prosecution is okay to accept it or adopted by the court, it may make corruption attractive. Do you share that view, and why so? He is paying a huge chunk of the money. He says he only took about 27.5 million for business promotion and is willing, in the place of this 27.5 million, to pay back 90 million over a 6-month period.
1 year.
Is it one year period?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, this morning also following up, just following on some of the discussions with the other the sister radio stations, I've also learned a lot about the case itself, and understand that the state's loss that is focused on is about 192 million, and I think 100 million or so, or 101 or so million was returned. Basically, it was an account that was returned. Yes, he's saying that it's only 27 or so million that he's responsible for. And so from the state's position, they think that what they have moved the current situation to is much more closer to the total sum of money that they thought that he was responsible for, and the people that have been charged, together with him. Now, the issue about whether the arrangement is fair, at least the terms of the agreement is fair, really at the end is more about what it is in terms of policy as a country that we want to set an example. If I mean, for me, grand corruption is one of our biggest problems that we have in the country. And if we wanted to deter people from it, what is our orientation, our mindset when it comes to dealing with it? It's not just about getting money back. How do you convince people, other people who are thinking about doing the same thing, that this is not worth the while? All right. And I think that's where I think some of the problem is, because it become almost like a case-by-case process, rather than the Attorney General's office setting a guideline that when it comes to certain types of crime, this is how we are going to deal with it when it comes to using the plea bargaining process or the Courts Act. So there's some sort of predictability, because based on this, I don't know what the Attorney General is going to do in the next set of cases, and whether we know that this is a consistent application of the discretion that the Attorney General has. And I think that's where, for me, the issue is. So I'm hoping that, as the judge has said, come 13, there will be much more information as to the justification for accepting what has been proposed or what has been negotiated. And if that is the case, at least we know that there's a third party that's also looking out in terms of the interests of Ghanaians. But the issue about custody as opposed to reparations and those things, I think it's vital, because what is the difference between why should we give Mr. Atuese a different process compared to somebody who some bank teller or somebody who has stolen 20,000 cedis, because they jail them all the time. They don't get to use the Courts Act. So what is the policy as a state, as an anti-corruption policy? What examples do we want to set? And I think that's important. Otherwise, then it depends on how much money you steal. The bigger the money, the more likely you are going to have to do reparations. And I think that will not be appropriate. One of the Afrobarometer surveys have always pointed out to this unequal application of the law, and people get resentment because of that. And that's why I think you can see the public reaction. The other point about the Courts Act, for me, again, the whole concept is that to avoid us going to spend resources on taking you to trial, we give you an opportunity to admit your crime, and then we can negotiate a befitting, punishment. So the way this has been done is just that you can waste all our time and our resources and our efforts and our energy all the way until you are going to get judgment, and then you can pull up and say, no, okay, now I admit. And I think the judge raised that point, because if you look at the times where the judge sort of encouraged this, it was first before the trial went forward, second in when the accused was supposed to start his defense. So the timing was so that it can still prevent us from going through that process. So to pull it out at the end, and I think there has to be some clarification in the law around that, because all around the world, when these plea bargaining is used, it's mainly to prevent, resources just being expended to go through the trial stage. And it looks like here it's very, very open, maybe just because of practice. So that itself, I think, needs clarification.
Yes, but in other cases, that you, like the case of the teller, for example, that you cited, you don't really get the money back, or you may not get the money back. In this case, the state gets to get some of the money back. And what would the state gain in putting Atuisem, for example, behind bars, vis-a-vis having 90 million cedis or more from him, and still, passing judgment on him, making him a convict, and making him suffer all the challenges or difficulties that being a convict places on him? Isn't it a better arrangement, rather?
No, I mean, I think, so what you are talking about is equality before the law. If the teller was also given the opportunity that, okay, you stole 20,000, we can, or he comes and make that I'll pay in 1 year, 5,000 every quarter or whatever, why wouldn't he be given that opportunity? But the point is that offer, and whether or not the Attorney General or the prosecutor chooses that, it's not one that is clear. At what time do you activate it? And should it be based on the quantum of money that the person has stolen? You see, that's so I think that if you do that, then you are obviously not applying the law equally. So yes, there might be complex financial crimes, what they call white crimes, that makes it much more complicated after you have convicted somebody to get the money back. And we have Woyome and other cases like that. And so you'll be eager to do. But yes, practically that is good. But in terms of what kind of signal do you send to would-be criminals, I don't think that you sort of achieved your aim in that respect. So I think that if that is going to be done, there has to be some real clear guidelines from that, because the Attorney General is always exercising discretion in these matters. And granted that it has to be based on the case, but there has to be some guidelines about government policy that when it comes to these type of crimes, this is how we want to proceed. So if we see these kinds of agreements and terms, we know there's some consistency, but it doesn't just apply to just this category of offenses, that also when it has to deal with certain matters, maybe we have to also consider community service and other kinds of things that we've talked about, non-custodial sentencing, to add to it, to demonstrate that there's still some public shame, some, the public can see, physically that this person has been punished. And I think it's very, very important, because if you don't do that, a lot of people think there's a different rule for the rich, the powerful, those who have networks and so on, and everybody else basically is treated very harshly.
All right, thanks so much, Doc. Let me come to Honorable Ricky Tegan. Just quickly, having 90 million cedis back is quite a lot of money. You still hold a view that he could do better?
Well, as we were saying, this is still a matter in court, and going through this legal wranglings of whether it should be restitution and reparation and all that. Obviously, yes, 90 million is a lot of money, and if the state can get it, I hope it will be part of the money that will obviously go to people who had their money with this bank, as government told us that they have protected, the depositors. But it looks as if, you know, the more you steal, the more likely that you can get away with it, you know. And the example that he gave about the teller, him. But we need to be able to be serious with these issues to make sure that people are actually punished for their crime, and that it becomes a deterrent from other people from doing the same in the future. But I will place this, and I will end on this, is to look at the genesis of the issue, which is to do with a lack of or a failure by the central bank in terms of supervision and oversight responsibility of these banks. And also the government's knee-jerk reaction of collapsing these banks, and now they have muddled the whole issues, like where he's saying some money was with Heritage and all those things. I mean, if these banks were there, we'll be able to trace things properly. Now banks have been amalgamated, they have been taken over.
Record should be there for those things to be seen.
The record is not as clear as you think. You know, so the basis, we have to look at where the problem is coming from. Not only, you know, what punishment should be meted to someone, but actually to prevent these things. And the failure of this whole thing is to do with supervision of the Bank of Ghana not meeting their oversight responsibility, and the central and the government knee-jerk, you know, reaction of closing down these banks.
All right, Franklin, you have 30 seconds on this.
Well, I think I yield my points exactly to what Honorable Ricketts Hagan has just said. I think we needed to say never again should we have this type of regulatory inefficiency, which ultimately led to this.
Very well. Dr. Kabir, you have the final
So thank you very much. I think that I will also want to side with my senior brother, Martin, that when it comes to issues that are before the court, we have to be cautious, but also learning from my senior brother, Ricketts, where he conveniently blamed the central bank under their regime, but blamed the government of the same central bank under MPP regime cannot quite be right, because the central bank, but there are sort of important issue raised. The central bank issue of prosecution for the wrongs. One of the positive I want to also concentrate is this admission of wrong somehow, which is an important thing. Another important is that the admission of guilt is also an important fact. And also there's admission that some people did certain things wrong between 2015 and 2016, which the government promised to prosecute, and the government is prosecuting them. Capital Bank and Beach Capital.
And very well. So this is how we conclude today's edition of the program. Martin, I'm sorry. Conclude today's edition of the program. We've been live from our studios at number 11, Dr. Martin Lupin at Arakan Accra. My guest this morning, the Honorable Ricketts Hagan MP, Cape Coast South, Dr. Kabiru Mahama, Technical Advice Office of the Vice President, Martin Pewu, I'm calling you Honorable, maybe God is speaking through me to you. Private legal practitioner, Dr. Mpupuni Asante, CDD, Director of Stakeholder Engagement, and then Franklin Kujo have been my guest this morning. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Okay, guys, so I need some help here, guys. You tell me what's been happening in the news this week, because for me it's all been like okay, first let me acknowledge that we are in a new month and wish everyone a happy new month to everybody, and congratulations to us all for making it here, because hey no, after COVID I thought we all thought this year we are covered, but boy, have we been through fire. Like when COVID was in its prime, We knew we had to wear nose masks and wash our hands in the running water with soap and all that, distance ourselves from people and things. But this year's pandemic, oh my goodness, the pandemic I call sidiosis. You don't use nose masks to cover your mouth for fear of contracting COVID. It is the price of goods and services. That was the very virus. I mean, when you heard the cooking oil the size of Kufuor gallon is like 1,000 Ghana cedis, you don't go like, hey, you shout, and at once you cover your mouth with your hands, and then you do social and economic distancing from the goods and services. That's how bad it has been. Just said, what a year this has been. What a year. And the mode of infection, Jai, brutal, super spreader, the Ghana cedi. You go to bed, you wake up, and the Ghana cedi has depreciated. You change your baby's diaper at 42 Ghana cedis. By the time you wake up, it's 75 Ghana cedis. The cedi has depreciated. In fact, you wake up, you turn the key like this, 100 cedis is gone. You step out, another 100 cedis is gone. By the time you yawn, 500 Ghana cedis is gone. What a pandemic. What a pandemic. In fact, I think the whole 2022 has been a pandemic. Can you imagine? So I was looking at my projections at the beginning of the year, like January, right? And I only shook my head and gave thanks to God, man, for being alive, because can you imagine? Like a camera that was costing like 14,000 Ghana cedis with a lens in January this year, 2022, in December this year, is costing 18,000 Ghana cedis without the lens. To say, being alive has never been so expensive. But in all, I mean, we move. Yeah, we got to move. My colleagues and friends have been teasing me that it's been a long time I said a befa. Because, mala, normal FIFA menu I do how much me I give it up, but still, a befa. On God, we'll do this.
Here for the show-stopping magic of a moment.
Get DSTV access with an HD decoder plus dish kit for only 169 Ghana cedis and upgrade to compact to watch all the 64 matches. Here for every fan.
Welcome to Backpage on Citi TV. My name is Caleb Kuda. So this week, I've been on leave. Yeah. In fact, I really had to return today so we can vibe on Backpage. Yeah, I love you that much. Yeah. It's tight like that. It's that deep. So I was away in a large-scale mine. And that's why I'm asking for help, getting to know what has been happening this week. I was away hosting the 7th International Trade Show and Conference at the Grand Arena. And if you know the Grand Arena, it is at the Accra International Conference Center. And for anyone who knows this place, you can tell that if you snap your fingers at the Grand Arena, anyone at the national security could hear you right away. Yeah, so it was some way. But in this economy, this has come to me. My brother, you want that star? No matter the location, so go me. Funny enough, I mean, after the event, I learned from the German organizer that when my name came up, they searched online, and the first thing that came up was national security. And I learned there was a bit of panic here and there. No, but soon there was unpanicking because, I mean, honestly, come on, man. But the time we were done, they were proud they chose me for the large-scale Galamsey. In fact, Zugu has worried me. You know, Zugu, you anywhere you are, you should know that you have really worried me. But God is good, you know what I mean? God is good. So I was focused on my concession. I was mining. Then I heard that NSS Ashanti region boss has gone to spot there. I was confused because this NSS, to me, I was like, hey, national security? And later I learned it was national service. I'm like, national service, anyway, I had, it was national service. So on behalf of all general arts students, right, we wish to, the man, he insults me. Oh, God. Hey. He finished me with two. What's it you're not answering for? Oh, yeah. Watch and get your cancel. Hey, this one, you have destroyed us. And you see how bad it can be for the nurses and doctors who are working there. Such a bad influence, man. But maybe I'll get back to that. I'm not too sure. Let's just move on to something more pleasant. Yeah, I'd get to that. Black Stars won against South Korea, but boy, did we all not experience palpitations. And did I hear some NPP MPs abandon the budget debate in Ghana to go and chill in Qatar in the name of supporting the Black Stars? Whoa, I love it too. But let's take it a step at a time. So tell me, like I said, I've been away. Which of the MPs didn't go to work in the chamber but went to chill in Qatar? Who do you know? Tell me, because me, I don't know. Say? Oh, right. Magajia herself was there? You mean Kilalomi? Sorry, Obal Van Dam. Okay, sorry. No. AKA Ubedi blocking. She was there too. Oh, amazing. Nice. I like the photos I'm seeing. I mean, it was really lovely. I mean, and she added a little history for those of us who are rookies, right? She says with Patrick Clauviet? I don't know, I'm sorry. Okay, so for those old enough to remember, I have reluctantly decided to teach those young, two-known people who don't know anything. No, but to those who are old enough to remember this legendary footballer from the Netherlands, loving the atmosphere in Qatar. That's what she said. I love that. In fact, I'm happy for Magajia because it's been a long time I saw her smile like this. Yeah, I mean, the last time I saw her on TV, me question me briefly. Hey, Mami Odzing.
By fire, by force,
Easy, man, because we don't beg you, easy. No, it looks like back at home, the blocking is happening. Have you been blocked yet? You've not been blocked? Have you registered? You've not registered? You've been blocked then? Have you not? Well, while Magajia enjoys the atmosphere in Qatar, some Ghanaians are not getting joy here thanks to her back and forth drama with a stubborn academy over whether or not it's necessary to do SIM card re-registration, NIA, whatever, all the Dijijan.
While I began to experience all of a sudden my network was on and off and on and off and on. So I just came around to verify. They said my SIM card is not registered. So now I have to go back all the way back home to get my card, my national ID card, and come back. Before I come back here, they are closed. Some of the networks say they are experiencing a network challenge with regards to the registration.
Anyway, you guys can continue complaining. Back in Qatar, while Asamoah was going through tensious moments, because really it was really getting tensious, like this.
By fire, by force,
Come on, man. That was every Ghanaian. Asamoah just represented every Ghanaian right there. Like the tensious moments, my goodness. I was eating watcha at the same time watching the Black Stars game, a family team. That's shit on them. But our ministers were in Qatar as well. And while Asamoah was going through that tensious moment, they were in Qatar's campaign stick. Particularly these two ministers, MPs. Ghanaians often say they have something in common. Can you guess? Can you guess? Take a look at this photo.
By fire, by force,
today my English don't be here, so I'm busy at home. That be the problem. Okay, so tell me, those of you who are saying Honorable Napo and Honorable Magajia have something in common. Sorry, what is it exactly? Sorry? I can't hear. I didn't hear. Oh, okay. Is that what you're saying? Well, I've heard you, but I won't repeat it. I can't say it. But who else was in Qatar? No. Wait, before we continue, the 2 goals Ghana conceded from South Korea, boy, they were painful, man. Painful goals.
Lee has another dangerous ball, and a goal! It's Cho who pounds